Chapter 5025. What a coincidence. Are you going out to get breakfast? Lin Yi smiled as he greeted her. The tall, slender girl didn't even bother with him. She didn't even look at him, much less reply. She turned around and went downstairs, leaving Lin Yi with a cold back view. Ugh. Lin Yi rubbed his nose awkwardly. Although they didn't talk much before, they would at least nod at each other. Now, he didn't even get this treatment. It seemed like the misunderstanding from last time was still there. It wasn't easy to improve their relationship in a short amount of time, but Lin Yi had no other choice. For Ling Shan and the others, he had to force himself to do it. The two went downstairs one after another. The tall, slender girl didn't go to buy breakfast like Lin Yi thought she would. She went straight to the direction she came from last time. Was she going to buy medicine again? Lin Yi guessed. He thought that she would be gone for a long time, like last time. He didn't think that she would come back in just 15 minutes with a bag of medicine in her hand. Lin Yi took the lead, and when he got to his room and opened the door with his key, the tall, slender woman was right behind him. He'd learned his lesson from last time. He'd probably be mistaken for peeking up her skirt again if he followed her up the stairs, and that'd be so frustrating. Hey, you haven't had breakfast yet, right? I bought an extra for you. Lin Yi turned to the cold girl, who was opening the door with her key. The tall, slender girl paused and looked at the breakfast in his hand, surprised. She shook her head. It's okay. You're welcome. I bought it on the way. About last time. Lin Yi didn't finish his sentence before the cold girl closed the door. She didn't want to talk to him at all. What a character. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. This cold girl was really hard to get close to, but since he had made up his mind, Lin Yi wouldn't back down so easily. Since she didn't want breakfast, he would have dinner. In the evening, a delivery boy suddenly knocked on the opposite door. There was no response at first, so he knocked a few more times before the door finally opened. What do you want? The tall woman looked at the delivery man coldly. Delivery. The delivery boy was obviously stunned, and he couldn't even speak properly. What takeout? The tall woman looked at the thing in his hand in confusion, unable to react for a moment. Didn't you order takeout? The delivery man was taken aback. He looked at the room number again and said, I didn't remember wrongly. At this time, Lin Yi's voice suddenly sounded behind him. He smiled apologetically and said, I'm sorry, I ordered takeout. I just moved here, and I'm not familiar with the place. I gave the wrong room number. So that's how it is. A total of 78. The delivery boy turned around and passed the takeout to Lin Yi, but his eyes kept peeking at the tall woman next to him. Such a beauty, with such temperament, and appearance was rare on the streets. Even after Lin Yi took the takeout and paid for it, the delivery boy was still reluctant to leave. He took his time walking up the stairs and looked back several times. He wanted to take a few photos with his phone. Unfortunately, Lin Yi and the tall woman were looking at him, so he didn't have the chance to do so. The tall woman looked at the takeout in Lin Yi's hand in surprise. She was quite curious, but she didn't ask. She turned around and was about to close the door and return to her room. Wait, I'm sorry to disturb you. I just ordered takeout for 2. How about we eat together? Lin Yi suggested. No need. The tall woman closed the door after she said that, not giving Lin Yi a chance to speak again. The cold girl was indeed a cold girl. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. He was already mentally prepared for this result. She didn't want breakfast, nor did she want dinner. Sure enough, water couldn't be poured in. But then again, even if he just wanted to get close to an ordinary girl in the secular world, he couldn't just casually bring her breakfast or dinner. There was nothing so easy in this world, not to mention that this was a master in the early stage of foundation establishment. The most important essence of this seemingly sloppy but time-tested method was patience. If he couldn't persevere, then this was undoubtedly a stupid method without any technical content. But if he could do this, then he would be wise under the appearance of stupidity, and there would be results in the end. People's hearts were made of flesh, especially girls, who were generally more soft-hearted. Even if they were very wary at the beginning, as long as he persisted for a long time, this person would naturally leave a deep impression in her heart, and this impression would most likely not be bad. After all, no one really hated others who tried to please them. It just depended on whether they liked it or not. In order to find out the background of those heavenly Tao stage masters, as soon as possible, Lin Yi also threw caution to the wind this time. Since once or twice didn't work, then he would do it a third or fourth time. He didn't believe that he couldn't melt the ice that was this cold girl. Of course, his skin was not thin to begin with. Although he hadn't done this kind of thing before, it was only because he didn't think of doing it. This time, he was full of motivation, so of course he would throw caution to the wind. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, Lin Yi relied on his primordial spirit to peep, and every time he was able to create a chance encounter. And then he would bring 3 meals as usual. He didn't know anything about this cold girl, and didn't know what she liked, so he could only work from the aspect of food. After a while, the tall woman felt strange. It was normal to encounter once or twice. After all, they lived opposite each other, and they would often see each other. But to encounter each other every day, and every time she went out, she would coincidentally bump into Lin Yi. This was very strange. What the hell was this person doing? Could it be that he had been watching the movements in my room all day long? The tall woman was secretly puzzled. Other than this, she couldn't think of any other explanation. After all, she couldn't say that these were purely coincidental encounters, and this was destined by the heavens. But even if she had doubts, she wouldn't open her mouth to ask. Every time Lin Yi tried to please her, she would still coldly refuse, without saying a word. This time, Lin Yi was a little anxious. Although there was no problem with this method, according to the current situation, it might not be effective even in a month. The cold girl could afford to waste time, but Lin Yi couldn't. The primordial spirit couldn't stay in the secular world for too long. If he wasted a few months on the cold girl, then he wouldn't be able to do anything else. Even if it was to get information, it couldn't be done in this way. Chapter 5026. With a thought, Lin Yi quickly thought of an idea. At this time, it was already night, and the sky was completely dark. The light blue electric arc between his fingers flashed slightly, and then he heard a crisp sound from the room next door. At the same time, there was the sound of tables and chairs colliding. The little cold girl must have been startled. Lin Yi knocked on the door, asking as he did so, "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing." The tall woman's voice was obviously a little flustered, but she did not come to open the door for a while. He did not know what she was dawdling about. Lin Yi could not help but be taken aback. He just used the electric arc to break the other party's electric lamp. He did not do anything else. At most, the room was a little darker. As a master in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm, why was this cold girl so flustered? He subconsciously released his divine sense to explore the situation, but after discovering the situation inside, he immediately retracted it. Lin Yi's expression was very awkward. It turned out that the little cold girl bought so many medicinal materials, not only to brew medicine, but also to use a medicinal bath. At this time, she was soaking in the medicinal bath, clean and smooth. Although it was only a glimpse through divine sense, it was far clearer than the naked eye. Lin Yi almost had a nosebleed. The little cold girl was usually cold and distant, but he did not expect that after taking off her clothes, she had a completely different temperament. This strong contrast really made people's hearts itch, but any man would not be able to resist it. Lin Yi did not think that he was a dirty person. Usually, he would not use his divine sense to peep at others. There had never been such an embarrassing situation before. This time was really an accident. Fortunately, the little cold girl was only in the early stage of the foundation establishment realm, and her divine sense was not even at the beginning stage. She did not even notice his exploration just now, or else she would have rushed out to kill him. After waiting awkwardly for a while, the door finally opened a gap. Although the tall woman was wearing clothes and wrapped tightly from head to toe, her body still carried the moisture of just coming out of the bath, which could not help but make people's imagination run wild. "What's up?" The tall, slender woman frowned at the daydreaming look on Lin Yi's face. "Oh, I heard movement in your room. Did the light bulb explode?" asked Lin Yi. "I think so." The tall woman nodded, but she had no intention of letting Lin Yi in to help. She turned around and was about to close the door. "It just so happens that the light bulb in my room broke 2 days ago. I bought a few more when I replaced it. Why don't I replace it for you? Otherwise, it will be inconvenient in the dark at night. What do you think?" Linny said quickly. The tall woman hesitated for a moment. She obviously didn't want Linny to enter her room, but it was indeed troublesome without a light. She was only halfway through the medicinal bath, and she couldn't possibly clean her wound in the dark. In the end, she had no choice but to nod and say, "All right then. Don't worry, it'll be quick." Lin Yi finally entered the door. He was very familiar with the situation in the room. These days, in order to create a chance encounter, he would use his divine sense to explore several times a day, but it was the first time he actually walked in. Like the suite he rented, there were 2 bedrooms and 1 living room. Except for some of the most basic furniture, there was nothing else. It was simple and clear at a glance. It did not have the warm and lovely feeling of a girl's room. However, with the cold temperament of this little cold girl, if she was really like an ordinary girl, Lin Yi would feel strange. With the moonlight coming in through the window, the situation in the room could more or less be seen. Lin Yi pretended to look for a switch and said, "Are all the light bulbs of your lights broken? It was the same for me last time. This place may be because of the new wiring. The voltage is not very stable. This is the disadvantage of the new community, but it's not a big problem. I just need to change the light bulbs." "Voltage?" The tall woman was stunned for a moment. "Yeah, don't you think so?" Linny glanced at her. "I don't know much about this." The tall woman shook her head, looking at her appearance. She was obviously a little curious, but she did not ask. Lin Yi nodded secretly. From this point, he could see that the other party was definitely not from the secular world. Otherwise, it would be impossible for her to not even know such basic knowledge as voltage. Her reaction was similar to that of the natives of the Heaven Stage Island. Seeing that the other party was curious, Lin Yi wanted to take this opportunity to have a good chat, but the tall woman said directly, "Then hurry up and change it." "Okay." The words that were at the tip of his mouth could only be held back. Lin Yi could only smile bitterly. This little cold girl really didn't want to talk to me. After changing the light bulbs, the room was quickly lit up again. Lin Yi turned to look at the little cold girl and found that her face showed a rare look of surprise, but after noticing his gaze, it quickly became cold again. "Okay, there's no problem now." Linny smiled. "Thank you." The tall woman's expression was obviously a lot more relaxed than before. At least, she no longer guarded against Lin Yi as a pervert who secretly took pictures of her skirt. However, that was all. It was still a long way from Lin Yi's expectation of quickly getting closer to the point where he could get information from her. "It's nothing. This is what I should do." Lin Yi was a little embarrassed. Of course, this was what he should do. After all, he deliberately broke the light bulbs. If he didn't change it, should he ask her to find someone else to change it? However, after hearing what he said, the tall woman misunderstood. Thinking of the constant encounters these days, the rare good expression on her face suddenly turned impatient, as if she was afraid of strangers approaching her. She immediately said, "Then I won't see you off." Huh. He was taken aback. He couldn't help but look at her with a strange expression. This little cold girl is too good at burning bridges after crossing the river. I just changed the light bulbs for her, and she wants me to leave. She doesn't even give me water. If I really leave like this, I haven't even said a few words. Getting closer to her is even more nonsense. Wouldn't I have done all this for nothing? The tall woman just looked at him coldly. She didn't have the slightest intention of asking him to stay, not to mention that she had such a cold temperament. Even if she wasn't, a girl couldn't let a man stay in her room at night, not to mention that she was about to soak in a medicinal bath. He could only bite the bullet and want to explain what happened last time. Even if he couldn't get closer to her, at least he had to explain the misunderstanding of secretly taking pictures of her skirt. Otherwise, he would never be able to talk to this little cold girl. You don't have to say more. You should pursue someone else. I am not the same kind of person as you. Don't waste your effort, or you will regret it. The tall woman said directly. This time he was completely stunned. I did all this just to get close to her, so that it would be convenient to get information from her in the future. I never thought of pursuing her. Chapter 50:27. He stood at the door, speechless for a long while. He didn't know how to react other than to laugh and cry, but the girl's words were like a wake-up call. Right, he could use the excuse of chasing after her to get close to her. Speaking of which, the relationship between men and women was just that. In the face of a beautiful woman, like little cold girl, a strange man like him was trying to get close to her. Pursuing her was the most logical reason. Otherwise, she would suspect that he had ulterior motives. In that case, she would be more wary, and it would be harder to get information out of him. Furthermore, it was related to the background of these heavenly Tao experts. If she was just an ordinary friend, the little cold girl might not have said it. Only after she became one of them would they be able to get the most detailed truth. However, although he had a lot of female friends, he had never pursued a woman before. Ever since he left the mountain, he had only taken the initiative to pursue Tang Yun. Moreover, it was only half the initiative. The others had always been natural. He really didn't have to spend much effort to pursue them. He admitted that he had neither experience nor talent in this kind of thing. However, in order to understand such a shocking matter, there seemed to be no better choice at the moment, so he could only bite the bullet and make an exception to chase after her. Although he had his own goals, fortunately, this little cold girl was also quite beautiful. She was cold and aloof to the point of being 1,000 miles away. It was difficult to get close to her for a while, but she had a different kind of beauty that made one's heart itch. Even if he was rejected a lot when he tried to woo her, at least she was still pleasing to the eye and not annoying. It's decided. Linny made up his mind and smiled faintly. He didn't have anything else to do other than recovering his strength, and recovering his strength wasn't something that he could just focus on. He had to have a certain amount of relaxation, or it'd be the opposite of what he wanted. The two of them lived opposite each other, and he had nothing to do anyway. In this way, he became even more attentive than before. In the past, in order to not arouse the other party's suspicions, he had to do everything possible to create a chance encounter. But now that he had made it clear that he wanted to pursue the other party, he didn't even need to create a chance encounter. He just needed to go to the door and be attentive. Early the next morning, Lin E ran to the opposite door and knocked on it again. If the door didn't open after the first knock, he would knock a second and third time. Anyway, he was very thick-skinned. Finally, the tall woman opened the door and looked at the flowers in Lin Yi's hand with a strange expression. "What are you doing?" "It's for you." Lin Yi felt a little strange. Wasn't it a necessary step for a man to send flowers to chase after a beauty? It was a matter of course. Although it was vulgar, it was absolutely necessary. That was what the Book of Hooking Up with Girls said. If you send flowers, it doesn't mean that you will win the heart of a beauty. But if you don't send flowers, then you have no hope in this lifetime. But when Linny said that, the tall woman was even more puzzled. "Why did you give me this? Is this also breakfast? Don't tell me you eat flowers?" Although it was said that flowers were grass, and since people could eat grass, they could naturally eat flowers. But this was too strange, wasn't it? What's more, he had been in the secular world for so many days, but he had never seen anyone eat flowers in public. Lin Yi was suddenly speechless. This conversation was really wrong. Who would eat flowers as breakfast for no reason? However, he immediately reacted. Since this girl was not from the secular world, it was not strange that she was not familiar with this kind of thing. At least on the Heaven Stage Island, no one would send flowers. Those pursuers would send elixirs or spirit jades. Lin Yi had never seen anyone send flowers in public. After all, flowers were just for looking good, but they had no practical value. It was estimated that sending flowers was a unique custom of the secular world. The cultivation world had always been practical. The definition of romance there was completely different from the secular world. At the thought of this, Lin Yi smiled and said, "As the saying goes, fresh flowers should be matched with beautiful women. The most beautiful flowers should naturally be given to the most beautiful person." To speak the truth, if it wasn't because he wanted to take down this cold girl as soon as possible and understand the situation, Lin Yi really wouldn't be able to say such mushy words. These were all priceless words from the Book of Picking Up Girls that he had searched online last night. He had memorized all of them without missing a single word. The tall woman received the flowers in a daze. Just when Linny wanted to praise that the Book of Picking Up Girls was really effective, she threw the flowers into the trash can at the corner of the stairs and said coldly, "Ridiculous, I don't need it." Linny thought for a while. The Book of Picking Up Girls was also prepared for such a situation, and even had follow-up lines. He immediately recited, "Why do you have to do this? Flowers are not guilty. Flowers are not guilty." The tall woman was stunned again. She then said, "What does this have to do with guilt or not? Flowers don't have life, so it's not as important and valuable as a random herb. You're really strange." No. From the perspective of modern biology, plants and animals are living things. In other words, flowers are living things like us humans. Lin Yi corrected. Modern biology? What's that? The tall woman was even more astonished. She looked at Lin Yi as if she was looking at a lunatic. He actually said that flowers were like humans. Was there something wrong with this guy's brain? Lin Yi suddenly realized that he had done something stupid. In the past, when he was extremely bored, he had also tried to discuss scientific issues with his bitter senior Marshall brothers and the natives of the Heavenly Island. In the end, they would argue for 10 days and 10 nights, and no one could convince the other. After all, the worldview that they had grown up with was different. Such things couldn't be explained clearly in a short time. Even if this cold girl's background was not on the Heavenly Island, it was probably not much different from the Heavenly Island. Discussing modern biology with her was simply playing the lute to a cow. Well, memorizing the Book of Picking Up Girls for a whole night was a waste. She didn't fall for it at all. Lin Yi now felt like he had returned to the Heavenly Island. He spoke the language of the secular world to them, but they couldn't understand him at all. Not only did they not understand, but some of their logic was also completely opposite. If he really kept arguing like this, then there was no need to do anything. He should just be prepared to argue until the end of time. Seeing that Lin Yi was choked and speechless, the tall woman said, "I said it last night. You don't have to waste your time on me. I'm different from you. It's impossible for me to be with you, so you don't have to try to please me anymore. That's all I have to say. You're on your own." Chapter 50:28. Lin Yi held his forehead and sighed. It seemed that if he wanted to pursue this little cold girl, the flowery words of love from the Book of Picking Up Girls wouldn't work. He really had to use the Book of the Cultivation World. However, the Book of Picking Up Girls in the secular world could be found on the internet. Who would ask for the Book of Picking Up Girls in the cultivation world? After thinking about it, Lin Yi suddenly realized that he could only learn from those idiots. How did Ren Zhongyuan, Bao Zhuliang, and those idiots pursue Hu Yudi and Wang Xinyan and Su Lingchong? How did he curry favor with Shangguan Laner? Thinking about it carefully, these people seem to be giving things away in addition to all kinds of flattery. Of course, at the level of Shangguan Laner and the others, they definitely couldn't take out ordinary spiritual jades. At most, there were all kinds of rare elixirs. If he took out a 7th-grade beauty pill to chase a girl, if it was another girl, he was afraid that he would be able to woo them. Lin Yi had everything those idiots had. Even things that they couldn't get, Lin Yi also had them. There were many good things in his jade pendant space. Even if he didn't have them, he could refine them on the spot. Anyway, his elixir storage had already begun to take shape. But the problem was how to give these things out. This wasn't the same as the flowers. There had to be a suitable excuse to give it to someone, right? He couldn't just take it out for no reason. One had to know that normal people wouldn't have these things in their hands, and they wouldn't give it away easily. What the cold girl didn't know was that he was a practitioner as well, and a very powerful one at that. If he suddenly took it out, he would definitely be shocked, but it was hard to say what kind of reaction he would have after the shock. Maybe the little cold girl would treat him as an enemy of unknown origin. That wouldn't be fun. Lin Yi couldn't think of a suitable way at the moment. After all, it wasn't as simple as breaking her light bulb. It wasn't easy to find a suitable opportunity. In desperation, he could only continue to use the old method of sending flowers and food to the little cold girl every day. Although he knew that it was useless, at least he could get familiar with her and achieve some subtle effects. Sure enough, this kind of old-fashioned method of courting, the little cold girl didn't fall for it at all. From the beginning to the end, there wasn't a single time that she didn't reject him. However, Lin Yi didn't care about this. He still persisted in greeting her 3 times a day in the morning, noon, and evening. His love was stronger than gold. With the other party's cold temperament, Lin Yi was actually a little afraid. If he really annoyed her and made her angry, wouldn't it be self-defeating? What surprised Lin Yi was that although the cold girl was still indifferent to his attentiveness, her attitude seemed to have softened a little. At least, she wasn't as cold and distant as before. Every time she saw Lin Yi, her expression had changed from indifference to helplessness. Every time she saw Lin Yi, her expression changed from indifference to helplessness. Lin Yi didn't know whether this change was good or bad. However, since he had decided, he couldn't give up halfway. Even if it wasn't good, he could only bite the bullet and do it. However, he couldn't go on like this. 10 days had passed since his primordial spirit was projected. The strength of Lin Yi's primordial spirit had also recovered from the late stage of heaven stage to the early stage of foundation establishment. The effect wasn't as good as expected, but it was still passable. If Southern Aurora knew about this, he would definitely vomit blood in depression. What else could he do after recovering to the early stage of Foundation establishment in 10 days? However, this was only because Lin had the jade pendant. If it was someone else, it wouldn't be so easy. The problem was that the little cold girl's attitude only changed from cold to helplessness. Lin still couldn't talk to her and didn't have a suitable opportunity to take out things like spiritual medicine and spiritual jade to improve further. If he said he wasn't anxious at all, he would definitely be lying to himself. Unfortunately, it was useless to be anxious. All he could do was continue to wait. In the end, before the opportunity came, 2 ghosts appeared. Of course, just like the old man and the crew cut, they were 2 fake ghosts. Boss Huang spent a long time and finally found 2 replacements. They were also con men who had been in the underworld for years. They patted their chests loudly when they talked about it. They seemed much more reliable than the old man and the crew cut. However, to Boss Huang's surprise, even he was deceived this time. The 2 of them were not professional con men, like the old man and the crew cut. They were just 2 street thugs who were good at talking big. They knew nothing about trickery, so they thought the trick was just to scare people. Little did they know that there were many tricks behind it, let alone scaring Lin away. The 2 of them could not even open the doors smoothly. They had the key that Boss Huang gave them, but they blocked Lin Yi's door and studied it for a long time, but they still couldn't find the keyhole. What the F***CK? What kind of broken door is this? Why isn't there a keyhole? One of the guys who was disguised as the Black Impermanence could not help but grumble. Shuh! The other White Impermanence quickly covered his mouth and scolded, "Are you crazy? We are here to scare people. How can we speak so loudly? Aren't you afraid of waking him up?" So what if we wake him up? Once he opens the door and sees us, the Black and White Impermanence, he will still be scared to death. The Black Impermanence chuckled. He turned around to look at the White Impermanence and said, "Seriously, even I am afraid of this disguise. Will he be scared to death? Do you think everyone is as timid as you? You don't even dare to walk alone at night. If you can't scare yourself, who else can you scare?" The White Impermanence pouted. "Seriously, do you think this house is really haunted? I heard that this residential area used to be an abandoned crematorium. That's why so many houses can't be sold. This place is really evil." The Black Impermanence shrunk his head and looked around. The corridor lights were voice-activated lights, and they were already off. The surroundings were dark. If he was alone, he would have been scared to death. "I heard that the crematorium was in the west. This is the east. How can you believe that bullsh***? The White Impermanence snorted, but after a pause, he said, "I heard that this place used to be a mass grave. When the houses were being built, many bones were dug out. Even the police were alerted." F***CK. This is even scarier. The Black Impermanence's heart skipped a beat. "All right, don't scare yourself. If there is really a ghost, why would Boss Huang ask us to pretend to be one? Hurry up and find the keyhole. I want to break the door down." The White Impermanence scolded. Chapter 5029. However, Lin did not plan to open the door. He would wait for them to come in and scare them with a ghost. This time, they would definitely be traumatized. "Found it! Found it! F***CK. What kind of stupid lock is this? The keyhole is on the doorknob. It's so dark, who can see it?" The 2 of them finally succeeded in inserting the key into the keyhole. They were overjoyed. However, before the 2 of them pushed the door open, the Black Impermanence suddenly felt that something was wrong. He suddenly grabbed the White Impermanence. "What? You scared me to death." The White Impermanence was scared witless. "No, don't you think that our shadows are a little strange?" The black impermanence's voice was trembling. What's strange about it? The white impermanence pouted. However, when he took a closer look, even he was trembling. He stammered, Why are there 3 shadows? The 2 of them could not be blamed for being suspicious. They already had a guilty conscience. Now that there were 3 vague shadows on the door, their first reaction was naturally in that direction. What do we do? The black impermanence vaguely felt that there was something behind him. He was so scared that his hair stood on end. He did not dare to turn around. Should we run? This place is too creepy. The white impermanence did not dare to continue. He turned around and wanted to escape. However, before the 2 of them could turn around, a cold woman's voice suddenly came from behind them. Is it creepy? The 2 of them were scared out of their wits. The white impermanence was scared out of his wits. The black impermanence simply knocked his head on the doorknob. His head was bleeding. What are you doing? It was still the cold woman's voice. The white impermanence did not know how to answer. He bit the bullet and peeked behind him. Indeed, he saw a blurry silhouette of a woman in white. In the dim environment, it was especially creepy. This time, he was completely scared out of his wits. Not only did he fail to pretend to be a ghost, he had encountered a real one. The black impermanence fell to the ground with a thud. Dizzy, he happened to be next to the woman in white's feet. He struggled and grabbed it. Suddenly, he sat up in surprise. There's body temperature. What? There's body temperature? So he's not a ghost, but a living person? White impermanence finally reacted. She straightened her back and said with a knowing expression, I just thought of it. If it's really a female ghost, why would there be a shadow? The 2 of them made a lot of noise. The voice-activated lights at the entrance of the staircase lit up, and the appearance of the woman in white was clearly seen by the 2 of them. She was not a female ghost. She was clearly a stunning beauty that could not be found even with a lantern in front of them. Oh, it's a great beauty! The black impermanence crawled up from the ground with a swish and looked up and down at the figure of the woman in white with a lewd smile. He gestured and said, Pretty girl, you're quite tall. Are you a model? It's the middle of the night, and you're not staying at home. Instead, you come out and pretend to be a ghost to scare people. Look, my head is broken from kowtowing. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me? How? Of course, I will accompany him. Don't be afraid, pretty girl. Although the 2 of us are gangsters, we still know how to have tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. How about we take you out to have some fun? Don't be afraid. It's just for fun. The white impermanence chuckled and reached out to pinch the woman in white's chin. However, before he could pinch her chin, she slapped him without any warning. With a bang, the white impermanence fell to the ground. His mind was in a daze. The black impermanence stared blankly at his brother on the ground. His first reaction was not revenge, but curiosity. Why was this pretty girl's hand so strong? How dare you hit me? You know who I am? I'm Pheasant of Shima, South Street. My brothers in the underworld have to respectfully call me Pheasant Grandpa. Girl, do you want to die? The white impermanence staggered to his feet and was about to lash out. In the end, the other party slapped him again, and he fell to the ground with a bang. This time, the white impermanence was completely stunned. He couldn't get up for a long time. The black impermanence beside him was scared silly. When he saw the woman in white looking at him, he hurriedly covered his face and begged for mercy. Don't hit me. Don't hit me. He's Pheasant. What are you? The woman in white suddenly asked. I'm Bupie. The black impermanence covered his face. Bupie. The woman in white was taken aback. It's that place where the skin is longer. The black impermanence carefully explained. The woman in white thought for a moment before she understood. Her face immediately turned red as she kicked the black and white impermanence down the stairs. Shameless and perverted, the two hugged each other and immediately disappeared. The woman in white turned to look at Lin Yi's door and shook her head. On account of you being a good person, I'll help you this time. It's considered returning the favor for the past few days. Sigh, how annoying. So this is how men in the secular world chase after girls. It's so strange. The woman in white was the cold chick who lived opposite. With that said, she turned to return to her room. But at that moment, Lin Yi's door suddenly opened. Thank you. Lin Yi looked at her and smiled. He thought that this cold chick was cold and inhumane. Only now did he realize that she had a heart. Even without the other party's help, he could still scare away the two hooligans who pretended to be ghosts, and he estimated that they would be even more frightened than they were now. But since the cold chick took the initiative to help, it was not a big or small favor. Ah! The tall woman was shocked by him. Lin Yi's silence was even scarier than her just now. She said with lingering fear, "Why did you come out? It's impossible for me not to be woken up by such a big commotion, right?" Lin Yi smiled. "That's true." The tall woman nodded, and then suddenly asked a little nervously, "You didn't hear what I said just now, did you?" "I didn't hear you say it. It's so strange," Lin Yi said with a faint smile. "That's good. I'm going back." The tall woman breathed a sigh of relief, but after turning around and taking 2 steps, she realized that something was wrong. She turned to look at Lin Yi and said with an unfathomable expression, "You heard it all?" "Yeah, you think it's strange, but I think what you said is even stranger. Are you not from the secular world?" Lin Yi took the opportunity to probe. The tall woman was silent for a moment and said seriously, "These things are not what you should ask, and it's not what you can ask. I advise you to forget what I said, or else you might get yourself killed." "Is it that serious?" Lin Yi was planning to take this opportunity to talk about the topic. Unfortunately, the cold chick closed the door after she finished speaking, not giving him a chance to get to the bottom of it. Chapter 50-30. Back in his room. While Lin Yi secretly had a headache, he once again used his divine sense to observe the movement in the next room. He found that the little cold girl was still taking medicine and taking a medicinal bath. Her injury had not healed even after 10 days. If Lin Yi helped, her injury would probably be healed in minutes. Even if she only took the 4th grade Great Recover pill, she should have recovered after so many days. It was a pity that although she used the medicinal herbs of the 4th grade Great Recover pill, it was only the least efficient decoction. Even with the medicinal bath, it would be good if she could have 1/10 of the effect. What's more, this was the secular world. There might still be very thin aura of heaven and earth in the deep mountains and forests, but it was equivalent to none in this city where humans lived. This meant that it was difficult to replenish every bit of aura consumed in a short time. As a result, the little cold girl naturally recovered even slower. In this situation, not only the little cold girl was anxious, but even Lin Yi, a bystander, was anxious for her. He couldn't help but shake his head, secretly. It would be better if I said it directly just now. In order to get closer to her as soon as possible, I would definitely help her heal. Why would I need to put in so much effort? Little cold girl's unapproachable personality was really harming others and herself. When Lin Yi was hesitating whether to find a chance to break the window paper to help her heal, he saw the little cold girl gritting her teeth. Suddenly, she carefully took out something from the package. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a piece of spiritual jade. However, the color of the spiritual jade was already very dim. The remaining aura of heaven and earth in it must not be much. If this quality was placed on Heaven Stage Island, it would definitely be thrown out as a waste jade. Only people like Lin E, who had the space of the jade, would keep it as waste. But such a piece of jade that was a waste in Lin Yi's eyes had now become a treasure in the hands of the little cold girl. At this time, she took it out with a distressed look, which really made Lin E amused. Little Lung Nyo held this spiritual jade in her hand, gritted her teeth, and absorbed 10% of the world's aura from it. Finally, she had a ready-made replenishment of aura. Her condition was obviously much better, and her face became a little ruddy. However, her injuries were still far from being healed. This little bit of world's aura could only slightly alleviate the urgent situation. She was like a traveler walking in the desert. Not only was she injured, but she was also thirsty and tired. The spiritual energy she absorbed was only equivalent to drinking a mouthful of water. It gave her a bit more physical strength to fight against her injuries. If she could not get more replenishment, the final result would be that her physical strength was insufficient and her injuries would worsen. One could imagine the outcome. The secular world was a paradise for ordinary people, but for cultivators who were extremely dependent on the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Even if it wasn't hell, it was at least like a desert. The environment was unprecedentedly harsh. Under normal circumstances, it was still manageable once the little cold girl was injured. Even if the injury itself was not so serious, it would often continue to worsen due to the lack of aura until it developed to the point of no cure. This was the cruel secular world. Although the little cold girl had not reached the point of no cure because she insisted on taking medicine and taking medicinal baths, it was still a problem that her injury could not be healed. If she could not get enough aura replenishment, even if the situation did not worsen, there was no possibility of recovery in a short period of time. She knew this very well, but she only had this piece of spiritual jade in her hand, and the aura was about to be depleted. What could she do? She had to use such a little bit of aura, sparingly. This time, it was already an exception to use 10% at once. She didn't dare to use any more, so she could only put it away carefully. Linny looked at this scene thoughtfully. From what the little cold girl said just now, one thing could be confirmed. She was indeed not from the secular world, and she actually had a piece of spiritual jade in her hand. This meant that the place where she came from must have a lot more aura than the secular world. It was impossible for a place like the secular world to naturally produce spiritual jade. In addition, Lin E could also conclude another thing at the same time. The little cold girl was definitely not from Heaven Stage Island. After all, she was a master in the early stage of Foundation establishment. If she came from Heaven Stage Island, even the new disciples on the North Island would not pay attention to this kind of waste jade without any aura, let alone treasure it like she did. What's more, according to the market price of Heaven Stage Island, the value of the 4th grade recover pill medicinal materials she bought was far more than a piece of spiritual jade, let alone such a piece of waste jade. Therefore, Lin E could roughly infer the situation of the little cold girl's place. The concentration of aura was much higher than that of the secular world, but it was far less than that of Heaven Stage Island. Although it could produce spiritual jade, the quantity was very rare, and it was definitely not as common as in Heaven Stage Island. Only this could explain the situation of the little cold girl, and also explain why so many masters of Heaven Dao's stage suddenly appeared. However, Lin E didn't know where they came from. In any case, Lin E was now ready to speak frankly as soon as possible. It was true that he was patient, but now a full 10 days had passed. He couldn't delay it so meaninglessly. What's more, he had been courting her for so long. Even if the little cold girl didn't say it on the surface, she had already established a certain sense of identity in her heart. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come out to drive away the 2 gangsters tonight. It could be said that the time was ripe. Lin E thought that even if he revealed his identity, he wouldn't be treated as an enemy. Early the next morning, Lin knocked on the door as usual. In the first few days, he had to knock several times, but now, basically as long as he raised his hand, the little cold girl would come to open the door. They had developed an indescribable tacit understanding. Sure enough, the tall woman opened the door very quickly. She habitually opened her mouth to refuse, but when the words were about to come out of her mouth, she suddenly realized that Lin was empty-handed today. She couldn't help but ask, curiously, "You don't want to give me something this time?" "Hee, it seems that you still want me to give you something." Lin smiled. "Who wants it? I was just curious." "Then why did you knock on the door?" The tall woman looked at him in confusion. "Actually, you guessed right. I still want to give you something this time." As Lin spoke, a small piece of jade suddenly appeared in his hand. He handed it to the little cold girl and said, "I have a piece of beautiful jade. As the saying goes, beautiful jade goes with beautiful women, so I want to give it to you." "I don't want it." The tall woman subconsciously refused, but when she glanced at the piece of jade in Lin Yi's hand, her eyes immediately fell into it. She couldn't move away anymore. She murmured in shock, how can this be?" The next morning, Lin knocked on her door once more. Her complexion was much better than the day before. Jade can nourish people. The old saying is true. Lin looked at her and smiled meaningfully. The tall woman's heart skipped a beat at his words. Could it be that he knew that this was a spiritual jade, and that she was healing by absorbing the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in it? However, she rejected this idea in the blink of an eye. What this guy said should be literal. He was just an ordinary person without any strength. How could he know these things? "This is the breakfast I just bought from downstairs. Would you like to have some?" Lin said as he handed over a hot breakfast. The tall woman didn't know what to do. According to the previous situation, she definitely wouldn't want it. However, she had just asked for his supreme grade spiritual jade yesterday. How could she refuse? She couldn't just say that she would accept a priceless good thing and reject a worthless breakfast. Then what kind of person would she be? Eat it while it's hot. Otherwise, it won't taste good when it gets cold, Lin advised. The tall woman hesitated for a long time. Finally, she took the breakfast from Lin and said in a somewhat complicated tone, "Thank you." "You're welcome. It's what I should do." Lin smiled and suddenly asked, "By the way, I've known you for so long. I still don't know your name." If it was before, Lin would never ask this because it was clearly asking for a snub. However, he asked it now as if it was a matter of course. After all, he had accepted the supreme grade spiritual jade. He couldn't not even say his name. The tall woman was in a dilemma for a moment. In the end, she followed his wishes and said softly, "Lung Lung." "Lung Lung?" Lin immediately felt that the person was like her name. He then asked, "What's your surname?" "My surname is Lung, and my given name is Lung." After she finished speaking, she closed the door and went back to her room. She didn't know why, but when she told Lin her name, she inexplicably blushed. It wasn't like this in the past. It was really strange. Lin chuckled outside. Although he still got the cold shoulder this time, it was obviously different from before. The other party not only accepted the breakfast, she even said her name. The method of the cultivation world was really effective. Although the method of Su Lingchong's fools was simple and crude, and it didn't seem to have any technical content, it was still widely used. It was indeed very reasonable. The most important thing for the women in the cultivation world was still strength. Lin went back contentedly. He had successfully completed his mission today. If he wanted to go further, he would have to wait for the next opportunity. Haste makes waste. It was impossible to achieve it in one go. On the other side, Lung Lung was eating the breakfast that he sent. She couldn't help but feel a little different. Her mind was full of nonsensical thoughts. In the small Jianghu of the ancient times, there was no lack of suitors with her looks. However, those people would at most give her some cultivation resources generously. It was the first time she met someone who sent her breakfast. Although it seemed insignificant, it was rare for her to persevere for such a long time. Unknowingly, Lin Yi was put on the same level as her suitors. Such a thing was unimaginable in the past. After all, one was an ordinary person while those were cultivators. How could there be any comparison? What was rare was that Lin Yi's impression in her mind was quite positive. This was not only because Lin Yi gave her the best grade spiritual jade, but more importantly, it was because of his subtle guidance for so many days. Even a woman with a temperament like Lung Lung wouldn't think that a person who was wholeheartedly attentive to her was a bad person for no reason. This was human nature. Chapter 5032. Just like her injury this time, the culprit was a cultivator who had been pursuing her all this while. Just because she accidentally took out a treasure and was seen by him, he actually had the intention to kill her on the spot. If it wasn't for her quick escape, perhaps she wouldn't just be injured this time. Instead, she would have become a corpse that no one cared about. Comparing the two, Lung Lung felt that Lin Yi, who was a normal person in the secular world, was much safer and more reliable. At least, he wouldn't be like those cultivators who would simply turn hostile and kill people, right? Lung Lung finished her breakfast while her thoughts were running wild. She shook her head with all her might and stopped thinking about these distracting thoughts. She pinched the supreme grade spiritual jade that Lin Yi gave her and focused on healing her injuries. Those people wouldn't let her go so easily. She had to recover as soon as possible. Although the place she was staying at was hidden, the problem was that she had gone to look for people to buy medicinal herbs for a few times. As time went by, it was very likely that someone would find out about her whereabouts. It would be troublesome if they came to her door before she recovered from her injuries. Fortunately, that item of hers wasn't snatched away back then. Fortunately, it seems like I'll be able to recover after today, thanks to this supreme grade spiritual jade of his. Lung Lung looked at the supreme grade spiritual jade in her hand and revealed a rare smile. Another day had passed in the blink of an eye. Lung Lung let out a long breath of turbid air. She finally thought that she had recovered. However, before she could stand up, her entire body suddenly staggered and fell back onto her seat. She was shocked to find out that the injuries that were supposed to be healed in her body had somehow resurfaced and relapsed again. Moreover, this time it was menacing. It was even more serious than the beginning. What a vicious method. Lung Lung immediately understood that the method that Bastard used to deal with her was not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Her injuries were a series of twists and turns. Even if she had recovered, it would still relapse. Moreover, she didn't have any healing elixir, like the 4th grade recover pill. It was even more difficult for her to recover. She could only rely on her willpower to endure it. This result made her feel a lingering fear. Fortunately, she had the top-grade spiritual jades that Lin Yi had given her. This way, at least she still had the hope of making it through. Otherwise, she was afraid that she would have been in despair at this time. The spiritual energy of the waste jade was not even enough to fill the gaps between her teeth. But even so, the situation was not optimistic for her. Although the spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the best grade spiritual jade was abundant, the spiritual jade was only so big. The spiritual chi would be exhausted sooner or later. What if her injuries were still recurring at that time? Just as she was worrying, Linny came knocking on the door on time. He was still carrying the breakfast he had just bought. Lung Lung received the breakfast in a natural manner. She hesitated for a moment before she could not help but ask, "Where did you get that piece of jade? Anything else?" "You still want it? That's easy. Even if I don't have it, I can think of a way to make it appear." Lin Yi smiled faintly. The scene just now was clearly seen by his divine sense, so he naturally knew why the other party would ask such a question. Pooh! Lung Lung was instantly amused. Just like a snow lotus blossoming on an iceberg, even Lin Yi was truly stunned by her. This little cold girl's beauty was truly extraordinary. Noticing Lin Yi's unusual expression, Lung Lung immediately reacted. She returned to her usual cold expression with a little embarrassment and said, "I don't know if what you said is true or not, but no matter what, you don't have to trouble yourself. Although I'm very grateful, I really can't promise you anything. We're really different." "That's right. I'm a man, and you're a woman. We can't be the same. It'll be a mess if we are." Lin Yi pretended to be ignorant on purpose. "That's not what I meant." Lung Lung shook her head, helplessly. She wanted to explain, but she did not know how to explain. To be precise, she did not dare to explain rashly. She could only say, "You'll know in the future. I'm destined to leave this place. It's okay. It doesn't matter if it lasts forever. I only care about having it once," said Lin Yi. Lung Lung's expression changed when she heard that. Her tone was rather unfriendly as she said, "What do you mean? You just want to play with me and let it go?" This is a very famous saying. I didn't make it up. Besides, I didn't mean it that way," Lin Yi said helplessly. This little Lung's reaction was quite sensitive. They obviously had nothing to do with each other. How could she say that they were just playing with each other and let it go? Oh. Lung Lung's expression eased up a little. She returned to her room after she glanced at Lin Yi with a complicated gaze. Lin Yi smiled indifferently. Although it seemed like there wasn't any substantial progress from his point of view, the fact that Lung Lung was able to say these words to him with her temperament was already a welcome improvement in itself. For the next few days, Lin Yi continued to send her meals every day. Lung Lung did not reject him every time. This kind of thing would become easier and easier as long as there was a precedent. Gradually, she had gotten used to the snacks that Lin Yi had collected from all over the place. If Lin Yi suddenly stopped sending her meals one day, she would probably feel uncomfortable all over. However, every time they met, she wanted to say something but stopped herself. In order to stabilize the recurring injuries as soon as possible, she needed to absorb a large amount of spiritual energy from heaven and earth in addition to drinking medicine and taking medicinal baths every day as a supplement. As a result, the spiritual energy reserve in the supreme grade spiritual jade was getting lesser and lesser. If she could not find other spiritual jade to replace it, the consequences would be unimaginable. She had the intention to look for Lin Yi and ask about the source of the supreme grade spiritual jade. However, she was afraid that after Lin Yi heard about it, he would really find a way to get another piece for her. It was already a great favor to accept a piece of supreme grade spiritual jade. If he were to give her another piece, how could she repay him? It was impossible for her to repay him with her body. She and Lin Yi were people from two completely different worlds. This kind of thing was simply impossible. After thinking about it, she suddenly thought of a compromise. One day after she received the breakfast, she suddenly asked, "I heard that we can look up things on the internet. How do I get on the internet?" "Huh, you want to go on the internet?" Lin Yi was stunned. He thought that he did not expect this little cold girl to be so motivated. It should be known that even if ordinary cultivators were interested in the high technology of the secular world, they would at most look at it. It was rare to find someone to ask for advice and learn like her. Yes, can you teach me? I even bought the internet, Lung Lung said, and gestured for Lin Yi to enter the house. This was unprecedented. The only time Lin Yi came in was when he changed the light bulb for her. Even if her attitude changed after she accepted the supreme-grade spiritual jade, she still did not have this kind of treatment. Following Lung Lung into the house, Lin Yi looked at the scene in the living room. Suddenly, his face twitched. He did not use his divine sense to explore for the past few days. He did not know that this little cold girl actually got a huge fishing net and hung it on 3 walls of the living room. Chapter 50:33. Yeah, they said that I can check things on the internet. I've studied it for a long time, and I still don't know how to access the internet. Lung Lung was confused. Of course you can't access the internet with this net, but you can use it to fish. Lin Yi could not help but shake his head and laugh. Lung Lung must have heard from somewhere that she could check information on the internet, but she did not understand the modern technology of the internet at all. She thought it was the fishing net that she knew. How to access it? Should she crawl on it like a spider? Fish. But I heard that you can check things on the internet. Lung Lung suddenly felt awkward. You can go online, but that's the internet, not your fishing net. What do you want to check? Lin Yi asked. I just want to check if there's a jade market nearby. I want to try my luck because not all jade wares are what I want. The kind of jade I want is very rare. Lung Lung answered. Lin Yi chuckled inwardly. The spirit jade you wanted wasn't just rare, it couldn't even be found in the common world. Even if you flipped the entire common world's jade market upside down, you wouldn't be able to find a single piece of it, let alone a small jade market. However, Lin Yi did not expose her on the spot. Although he was a little impatient when there was no progress previously and even had the intention to be frank, he was no longer anxious now. As long as he let nature take its course, the other party would naturally guess his identity one day. This way it would not be too abrupt, and there would not be any uncontrollable situation. There was no need to rush ahead because of a moment of impatience. After all, it seemed that the Heaven Tao experts had no intention of harming the order of the secular world's cultivators. The situation was not that urgent. Let me teach you, Lin Yi said as he took out his phone and began to explain the secular world's internet to Lung Lung. To be honest, this kind of thing was pure fantasy for cultivators who had no modern knowledge. They could not understand it in a short period of time. Even Lin Yi's mouth was dry from explaining it. Lung Lung was still confused. She could not understand what this virtual network was at all. Looking at her blank and innocent expression, Lin Yi finally felt helpless and said, Forget it. It's okay if you don't understand it. You just need to know how to use it. I'll teach you how to check. Look, just open this browser and type in what you want to find. Lin Yi demonstrated to her step by step, although Cold still did not quite understand these. At least it was much easier than understanding the concept of the internet. She could not help but exclaim with her eyes gleaming, This thing is really convenient, but why are these words so weird? They seem to be missing a lot of gestures. It's really uncomfortable to watch. Oh, these are modern, simplified characters, which is the simplified version of ancient traditional characters. If you are not used to it, you can set it to traditional. Lin Yi immediately set it to traditional for her. It's much more pleasing to the eye now. Lung Lung nodded. She didn't doubt that Lin Yi could set it up. I thought these 2 fonts were common in the secular world. I've found the jade market that you're looking for. There's one in the East District of Shima City. It's not a small one. Lin Yi passed the phone to her and saw that she was staring at the phone eagerly. He knew that, although she did not say it, she probably wanted a mobile phone in her heart. After all, this thing was really convenient to use. He suggested, "How about this? I'll bring you to buy a mobile phone first. Then we'll go to the jade market. What do you think?" Lung Lung thought about it. She nodded and said, "All right." One of the reasons why she agreed so readily was that her relationship with Lin Yi had been getting closer recently. She was no longer as distant as before. However, the most important reason was that she knew her place. Coming to the secular world from the ancient Jianghu world, even a person like her who could accept new things quickly would not be able to adapt in a short period of time. The way she talked and did things were often incompatible with the people in the secular world. She might get lost once she stepped out of the door. After all, the distribution of the cities here was much more complicated than the ancient Jianghu world. Even the most prosperous area in the ancient Jianghu world only had a few streets. There were so many streets and alleys here. An outsider like her, who was not used to it, would get lost if she was not careful. It was the same when she bought the medicine last time. It took her a lot of effort to find her way back. However, if she had a mobile phone with her, she could check the map at any time, even if she was lost. It would be much more convenient. Until now, she still didn't know that the most basic function of a mobile phone was to make calls. She thought it was used to search for things online. Both of them went out immediately, although both of them were cultivators, and it was only a matter of time before they entered the city. They did not want to break the window paper. Therefore, they could only wait for the bus to enter the city at the entrance of the residential area. This kind of experience was absolutely unprecedented for Lung Lung. Even Lin Yi did not have many experiences like this. In his impression, he had never taken the bus since he left the mountain, especially during the morning rush hour. Although it was definitely a miserable experience for the office workers who had to squeeze into the bus to go to work in the morning and evening, Lin Yi and Lung Lung felt that it was a fresh experience. However, what made both of them speechless was that it was a rare chance for them to take the bus. Both of them actually encountered the legendary bus Wolf. The bus was crowded and physical contact was inevitable, especially for a beauty like Lung Lung. Anyone would be willing to rub themselves against her. Naturally, there was no lack of perverted hands that would take advantage of the opportunity to take advantage of her. Lung Lung had never experienced something like this before. Before the perverted hands could touch her body, she turned around and kicked at the guy's crotch. Fortunately, she remembered the rules of the training and held back her strength. Otherwise, that kick would have killed him. The guy was in so much pain that he curled up like a shrimp. A gangster next to him immediately stood up for him. He shouted loudly in an arrogant tone, "How dare you kick my brother? Shanji, are you tired of living? Who is it? Stand up and kowtow to apologize." Lin Yi was amused when he saw the situation. Enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. Weren't these two Shanji and Pudgy, who came to pretend to be ghosts last time? So it's the two of you. Lung Lung turned around to look at the two of them. There was an inexplicable, murderous look on her cold, pretty face. She was not only a girl, but also a beginner stage foundation building expert. Her hands had seen blood and killed people. "Huh, it's you." Shanji and Pudgy were stunned. The bus was crowded. If Lung Lung had not turned around, both of them would not have been able to see Lung Lung's face clearly. They could only tell from her back that she was a rare beauty. Who would have thought that she was actually the woman in white who kicked the two of them until they wet their pants? Chapter 50-34. These two punks were considered to be somewhat famous in Shima City. They used to look for girls to take advantage of them on the bus. Most people dared not say anything to them, even though they were angry at them. They had never met violence with violence like this. Looking at this situation, these two punks were actually a little afraid of this girl. That was really strange. Climb out of the window and jump down by yourselves. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." Lung Lung looked at the two of them expressionlessly. This, Shanji, and the puffy skin looked at each other. They wanted to act tough, but when they thought of this woman's combat power, they would only be beaten up by her even if they joined forces. They did not have the guts to say anything at this time. Lung Lung was staring at them with such an unfriendly expression. It felt like they were being stared at by an extremely dangerous leopard. They could not help but feel their hair standing on end. "Stop the car. I want to get off." Shanji could only shout at the driver. Since they could not afford to provoke her, they could only admit defeat. "I'm sorry, there's no stop here. You can't stop the car," the driver in front said without turning his head. "F***CK. Stop when I ask you to stop. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Believe it or not, I'll bring people to your house to block the door every day," Shanji threatened. "I'll only count to 3. Don't blame me for being rude if you don't disappear." Lung Lung did not care whether the car stopped or not. She immediately started counting 1, 2, 3. Before her voice died away, Shanji and the puffy skin could not care so much anymore. They hurriedly jumped out of the window at the side. They fell with a bloody nose and a swollen face. Fortunately, the driver slowed down the speed. Otherwise, the two of them would definitely be hospitalized from the jump. The bystanders were dumbfounded by the scene. All of a sudden, every one of them regarded Lung Lung as a celestial being. Could this girl be the legendary plain-clothed policewoman? She could actually frighten the two punks to such a state. Lung Lung still acted like nothing happened. She even frowned without a trace. The reason why she insisted these two to jump out of the car was because she wanted to punish them. In fact, there was a more important reason besides punishing them. The car was too crowded. It was the morning rush hour now. Even if they were driven off in this way, the car would still be a mess. With her cold temperament that rejected people thousands of miles away, ordinary people would not be able to walk within 3 steps of her. Now, he was surrounded by people, and physical contact was unavoidable. How could he stand it? After hesitating for a long while, Cold Lung finally braced herself and moved closer to Lin Yi's direction. She would rather be closer to Lin Yi than to be squeezed by these strangers. At least they were familiar with each other, and she didn't hate Lin Yi. This unexpected action surprised Lin Yi for a long time. He never thought that the cold girl would take the initiative to approach him. Smelling the orchid fragrance of the other party close at hand, Lin Yi secretly thought to himself that the bus was really crowded. This was really a pleasant surprise. However, although the two of them were squeezed together, Lin Yi did not make any move to take advantage of them. He knew that little cold girl's willingness to stay with him was the result of so many days of hard work. If he had any thoughts that he shouldn't have at this time, he would destroy the good impression that he had made with great difficulty. He wouldn't do such a stupid thing. Towards Lin Yi's gentlemanly behavior, even Cold herself felt a little surprised. In her heart, Lin Yi was a very persistent pursuer. She thought that he would not let go of such a chance to enter the tiger's mouth. She was even mentally prepared that as long as Lin Yi did not do anything overboard, she would hug him for a while. Who knew that Lin Yi would be so restrained? He did not make any move to take advantage of her. As such, Lin Yi's impression in her heart became more positive and reliable. Cold Lung could not help but have a strange thought. This guy seemed to be more reliable than those pursuers of the ancient underworld. They were silent throughout the journey. When they arrived at the city, the two of them squeezed themselves off the bus with all their might. They looked at each other and let out a long sigh of relief. Squeezing into the bus during the rush hour was too scary. How did those office workers who had to squeeze each other in the morning and evening survive? It's convenient to take the bus, but it's too crowded. Cold smiled bitterly as she looked at the bus that was getting further away. After squeezing into the bus once, she did not want to take the bus for the rest of her life anymore. She would rather die than to take the bus again. We can't help it. Who asked us to be so unlucky to be in the morning rush hour? It would be better if we came a little later. It's a mistake. Linny smiled bitterly and said, Let's go to the cell phone store and have a look. I think it's just a little further ahead. Cold nodded. At the same time, she looked at the bustling city in front of her curiously. Although she had been in the secular world for a while, she did not come to the downtown area often. Strictly speaking, this was only her second time. She was in a hurry the last time, and she did not take a good look. She got lost in the end. This time, with Lin Yi's company, she could enjoy the prosperity of the secular world. You've never been here before? Linny asked casually. I've been here once, but I didn't take a good look. Your secular world. Cold was about to let the cat out of the bag. She reacted quickly and tried to salvage the situation. This place is quite different from my hometown. I should say very different. Is that so? Oh, yeah. I still don't know where you're from. Where are you from? Lin Yi's eyes lit up as he took the opportunity to probe. Cold did not know how to answer for a moment. She thought for a while and said, I think I'm from Hushi province. What she said was not a lie. If Shenangjia was the exit of the ancient little underworld, its geographical location was indeed in Hushi province. Hushi province? Linny was stunned. He did not know if what she said was true or false. He tried to probe. But judging from your accent, it's a little different from the people in Hushi province. Hushi province is a big place. There are many accents. It's normal to be different. Lung finally came up with an idea in this desperate situation. She was afraid that Lin Yi would continue to probe further. So she quickly changed the topic. Let's talk about yourself. What's your name? Where are you from? Lin Yi blushed with shame. Of course, he knew that she was trying to change the topic. However, he could not help but feel the urge to burst into tears when he heard what she said. He had been trying so hard to please her for half a month, and this little cold girl finally remembered to ask for his name. My name is Lin Yi. My hometown is the West Star Mountain Village. It's a small mountain village. I don't think you've heard of it before. Linny answered with a smile. Oh. Cold nodded. Deep down, she was relieved. She managed to dodge the question. Chapter 50:35. He did not know how Yun and the others were doing. Thinking of these female confidantes, Lin Yi could not wait to rush back to East Ocean City. However, he could not. Firstly, his strength had only recovered to the peak of the early stage of foundation building. He did not have an absolute advantage when facing those heavenly Tao stage experts. Secondly, he had yet to figure out the origin and intention of those heavenly Tao stage experts. How could he go back with peace of mind? You pick it yourself. See which style you like. I'll give it to you, Lin Yi said generously. All right. Lung agreed readily this time. She really wanted a cell phone, but she did not have that much money in the secular world with her. Naturally, she could only let Lin Yi give it to her. After all, the value of a cell phone was incomparable to the supreme-grade spiritual jade in her heart. Since she had accepted the supreme-grade spiritual jade, it made no difference whether she had a cell phone or not. Both of them walked around the cell phone store. Ordinary people would ask about the brand and configuration before buying a cell phone. Lung obviously did not know about these things. She only had one principle when picking a cell phone, which was to look good. In the end, she picked an Apple. He did not know that this little cold girl's aesthetic sense was quite compatible with the secular world. While Lin Yi thought it was funny, he could not help but feel lucky at the same time. Fortunately, he had gotten quite a lot of money from the two scammers. Otherwise, he would be struggling to make ends meet if he only relied on his 10,000 yuan. Can I go online with this now? Lung Lung asked eagerly. Not yet. We still have to buy a SIM card. There's a business hall here. With that, Linny brought her in and bought her a SIM card. He also set up a couple service, allowing them to call each other for free. Couple service. Lung Lung watched from the side. Although she did not say much, she still felt a little strange. She only came to a sudden realization when she saw a pair of lovey-dovey young lovers who also wanted to register a couple service. Could it be that the couples here were Dao companions? Lung Lung's gaze towards Lin Yi was a little strange. Although she still did not understand what was called free, she guessed that this service was definitely not for ordinary people. Only couples would do such a service. However, even though she guessed it, she had no intention of stopping him. After all, she knew nothing about these businesses. She could only let Lin Yi decide what to do. Besides, it was just a couple business, so it wasn't a big deal. In her eyes, all of this, including the phone, was just a game. It wouldn't have any substantial impact on their relationship in real life, so she let Lin Yi do it. After everything was done, she took her mobile phone from Lin Yi's hand and coldly tried to surf the internet according to the method Lin Yi taught her before. Sure enough, she could look up things. She immediately became happy. She had never tried this before. Lin Yi smiled as he watched from the side. Even an iceberg beauty like little cold girl would smile as long as she encountered something interesting. This was really rare. But then again, this little cold girl's learning ability was really strong. He had only roughly demonstrated it to her previously. Now that she had changed to a brand new phone, she could actually explore the internet on her own. Moreover, this was based on the premise that she knew nothing about the internet. If it was an ordinary person, they wouldn't be able to learn it so quickly. Lung Lung was surfing the internet happily. Seeing that she had opened another gossip website, Lin Yi held his forehead helplessly. If this continued, little cold girl could surf the internet alone until the sky turned dark. If she was born in the secular world, she would definitely be an otaku. You can surf the website slowly when you get back. Surfing the internet is just an additional function of a smartphone. Now, I'll teach you the phone's most basic and important function, making a phone call. Lin Yi had to interrupt. Make a phone call? Lung Lung was stunned. That's right. This is the essence of the existence of a phone. As long as you know each other's number, you can talk to each other even if you're thousands of miles away. It's just like face-to-face. Lin Yi smiled. So magical. Lung Lung was shocked at once. She even forgot the most basic disguise. Could this be the legendary voice transmission from 1,000 miles away? It's very magical, but you'll get used to it soon. Lin Yi demonstrated it to her as he spoke. With Lung Lung's strong learning ability, this was not difficult at all. She understood it at first glance. So there's really a voice transmission from 1,000 miles away. Moreover, ordinary people without any strength can use it. This is simply a divine tool. If this was in the place where I came from, I'm afraid it would have been snatched away like crazy. It's amazing that there's such a powerful thing in the secular world. Lung Lung could not help but murmur to herself softly. Although she spoke softly, Lin Yi, who was next to her, heard it. He immediately asked, "Don't tell me there's no phone in your place? Huxi province shouldn't be so backward, right?" No, my place is very remote. It's always been isolated from the world. So I've never seen something like a phone. Lung Lung was shocked. She quickly covered up and tried to salvage the situation. Is that so? If there's such a place in Hushi province, then the scenery must be amazing. I'd really like to go and have a look if there's a chance, Lin Yi said dubiously. Let's talk about it when there's a chance. Lung Lung forced a smile and shook her head. Although she was not lying, she was talking about the ancient little underworld. The scenery was indeed much better than the chaotic and noisy secular world. However, how could an ordinary person like Lin Yi go to that kind of place? There's always a chance. Lin Yi smiled faintly as if there was a profound meaning behind it. He did not want to get to the bottom of it because he knew it was useless to ask now. He then said, "Let me teach you other uses. Other than making calls and surfing the internet, there are many other interesting software and games on the smartphone nowadays." Really? Lung Lung revealed a surprised expression again. It was just a small phone, but it had so many magical functions. The secular world was really not simple. When he was teaching her these things, both of them naturally came together again. They were even closer than when they were on the public bus. Once again, he took a whiff of the refreshing orchid fragrance on her body. Lin Yi could not help but feel a little moved. The feeling of pursuing a girl gave him a different kind of feeling. It seemed to be the same as before, but also a little different. Chapter 5036. In addition to sighing, Lin Yi also felt a little guilty. He always felt that he had caused too many love debts, and it was really unfair to Meng Yao and the others. However, after staying on Sky Tier Island for 3 years, while his strength skyrocketed, his views were also changing. After all, no matter how he looked at it, he could no longer be considered as an ordinary person in the secular world. As his level changed, so did his vision and perspective. Forcefully maintaining the values of an ordinary person was not only unscientific, but also incompatible with the environment he was in. Thinking back to when he was still in the secular world, it was shocking to have a few girlfriends at the same time, but on Sky Tier Island, strength was everything. Someone like Zhang Liju, who had a few wives, was not a stain at all. Instead, he would only be looked up to and talked about, and no one had ever said anything wrong. At the end of the day, this was a change in thinking. Lin Yi was originally a typical secular person. He always felt that only monogamy was the most fair and reasonable, but after a long time, he felt that it was nothing. Love was something that came naturally, and it couldn't be forced or rejected. Training was not only about strength, but more importantly, it was the cultivation of the heart. As the saying goes, nature is as good as water. The higher the level, the more open-minded one would be, and the less obsession they had. Lin Yi's intangible change in thinking was actually a kind of transformation. One had to know that not only Zhang Liju, but even the super big shots like Shanghai Tianhua, who he respected, had more than one wife. It was because he was open-minded that he accepted Huang Xiaotao, Ning Xuefei, and Huo Yudi, these beauties, naturally, and also because he was pursuing Cold like he was now. Putting aside the motive of asking for information, Cold herself was also a girl who attracted people's love. A fair and graceful lady was a gentleman's desire. If Lin Yi said that he didn't have any urges in this aspect, he would definitely be lying to others. While Lin Yi was feeling strange in his heart, Lung Lung, who was almost leaning against him at this moment, actually felt the same way. Based on her cold personality, she would never allow anyone to get so close to her. However, she did not know why. Her heart did not reject this kind of slightly intimate action. It was the same when they were on the bus. She even felt that this feeling was faintly warm and sweet. She stole a glance at the young couple, who were also huddled together and playing with their phones, not far away. Lung Lung couldn't help but blush. Lin Yi soon noticed this strangeness, and he couldn't help but look at her with a little surprise. Once this little cold girl was really familiar with him, she seemed to be quite open. Was she a typical person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside? Both of them were too close to each other. When Lin Yi turned his head around, he could clearly feel the breath he exhaled. Lung finally felt embarrassed. She exclaimed softly and hastily took a step back. "What's wrong?" Lin Yi pretended to be at a loss. "No, nothing. Let's go to the jade market. We'll talk about the phone later." Lung looked a little embarrassed. Although she did not reject this kind of intimate but not excessive contact, she still felt a little shy in her heart. Most importantly, she knew that it was impossible for her and Lin Yi to be together, so she really didn't want to give him such an illusion. It was clearly impossible, but it gave him illusory hope, and in the end, she had to kill him with her own hands. There was nothing crueler than this in the world. All right. Lin Yi felt a little pity. However, this kind of thing could not be rushed. It was already a rare breakthrough to be able to have such intimate contact today. He would be surprised if it was just a step further. It was good to be like this now. Both of them immediately went to the jade market. Although it was called a jade market, it actually did not only sell all kinds of jade wares. At the same time, it also sold all kinds of gold and silver jewelry and even some antiques, calligraphy, and paintings. To be precise, it was a jewelry street. After all, Shima City was just a small county-level city. It was not like a big city like Donghai City that was full of shopping malls. Almost everything that one wanted could be bought in every shopping mall. Here, all the jewelry, jade wares, antiques, calligraphy, and paintings were gathered on the same street because it was the only way to attract enough people. I really didn't expect that there would be a jewelry street of this scale in this small Shima city. There are many shops selling jade wares and antiques. It's the right decision to come here today. Lin Yi stood at the entrance of the jewelry street and said in surprise, "Nowadays, in the secular world, there were all kinds of jewelry shops even in the smallest city. However, there were not many shops selling jade wares and antiques. Not every small city had them. Looking at the scale of Shima City, it could be vaguely compared to some big cities. It could be seen that the business atmosphere here was flourishing, which was rare. Well, there are so many," Lung said in surprise. At least in the small Jianghu in the ancient times, there was not such a bustling jewelry market. She did not have much hope for finding spiritual jades today, because the probability was very small. However, there were so many stalls here. If she was lucky, she might really find something. The two of them followed the crowd and started to shop on the jewelry street. Lin Yi was shopping blindly because he knew that there would not be anything good in this place. Spiritual jades were even more of a fantasy. However, Lung took it seriously. In her mind, since Lin Yi was able to find spiritual jades of the highest grade, there would be a second one if there was one. Of course, she would have to search one stall at a time. Of course, she did not even look at the gold and silver jewelry. She only looked at the jade wares. She could not wait to hold every piece in her hand and feel it. Only then could she accurately judge if there was spiritual qi. But this way, her actions were too strange. Who would touch all the jades in a stall and then not buy a single piece in the end? Though the owners were astonished, they were still doing business after all, and gold was a rare beauty. They would not suffer any loss if their jade wares were to be touched, so they pinched their noses and accepted it. However, their expressions were still a little strange. Lung did not care about the reactions of these irrelevant people. However, she was a little afraid that Lin Yi would be suspicious. Although there were many loopholes in her plan, she could not see clearly because she was closely involved. She thought that Lin Yi did not notice anything unusual. She must search carefully for the spiritual jades. However, if this continued, Lin Yi would definitely ask her what she was looking for. How could she fool him by then? While Lung Lung was struggling, Lin Yi suddenly suggested, "The jade you are looking for is similar to the one I gave you before, right? This jewelry street is too big. I don't know how long it will take for us to search one stall at a time. Why don't we search separately? It will be faster this way. We can even have lunch on time later. What do you think?" Chapter 5037. Lung Lung was extremely disappointed. At this moment, she saw Lin Yi walking towards her. He asked, "How is it? Is there anything you like?" "No." Lung Lung shook her head, helplessly. "I found a piece of jade here. It feels similar to the previous one. Have a look." A small jade suddenly appeared in Lin Yi's hand. "Really?" Lung Lung was shocked. She took the jade and felt it carefully. It was indeed filled with spiritual energy. It was another piece of supreme-grade spiritual jade. Lung Lung's gaze towards Lin Yi changed instantly. What kind of luck did this guy have? He had spent so much effort looking for it, for so long to no avail. In the end, he could just casually find a top-grade spiritual jade. He already had a piece before, and now he had another one. His luck was too heaven-defying. People really couldn't be compared with each other. "Where did you buy this piece of jade? Do you have any more?" Lung Lung quickly asked. She would never let go of such a supreme-grade spiritual jade during normal times, let alone replenishing her spiritual energy with a spiritual jade when she was injured. "Of course not. I have a very high standard when it comes to jade artifacts. It's not easy to find a pure jade with such luster. I'm already very lucky to find one." Lin Yi shook his head. "Luster? This jade has luster?" Lung Lung could not help but feel strange. She only looked at the abundance of spiritual energy when she picked a jade. She never cared about the appearance, nor would she carefully distinguish the luster. Of course, luster is one of the most important factors when picking a jade. Don't you look at it? Lin Yi was surprised instead. I don't know much about this." Lung Lung shook her head in confusion. Although it was only one piece, she was still very happy. She did not have to worry about the lack of spiritual energy. The stone that was hanging in her heart finally fell to the ground. She immediately asked, "This jade should be very expensive. How much did you buy it for?" "I'll find a way to give it to you." "Look at what you're saying. We don't need money with our relationship, let alone a piece of jade. Even if you want something more expensive, I'll get it for you without a second thought." Lin Yi took the opportunity to express his determination. "Really? Everything is fine?" Lung Lung gave him a meaningful look. "Of course." Lin Yi nodded decisively. "If it's something that's very useful to you, or something that's very useful to you, would you still be willing to give it to me?" she asked coldly. She thought that Lin Yi didn't know the value of these two pieces of top-grade spirit jades, let alone the use of these two pieces of top-grade spirit jades. She thought that they were just ordinary jade ornaments, so he didn't hesitate to give them to her. If it was something else that was very important to him, she was afraid that he wouldn't give it to her so quickly. Initially, Cold Lung thought that the other party would certainly hesitate for a moment when she raised such a difficult question. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi nodded his head firmly without even thinking, "I'm willing to," putting aside the fact that he was pursuing Cold Lung now. He gave it to Qinyu without hesitation when he was about to enter the Thunder Calamity Point, and he only had one Thunder Profound pill with him back then on the Thunderous Plain Island. One should know that Qinyu wasn't even a friend to him. She was just a passerby that he had some connections with. Lin Yi was never a stingy person. As long as there was something good, as long as it was beneficial to the people around him, he would not hesitate to share it with everyone, whether it was a friend or a follower, as long as they were trustworthy, they would be treated the same as those female confidants. He would never hide anything from them. Based on the current development, Cold might become his female confidant. Naturally, he would not be stingy with Cold. No matter what she wanted, as long as she really needed it, he would definitely find a way to get it for her, even if he didn't have it with him at the moment. There was no doubt about that. Upon listening to the answer, Cold fell into silence as she looked at Lin Yi's serious expression. She was a little touched in her heart. Although she could not be sure if Lin Yi was just talking about it or if he was really thinking about it, she believed that it was most likely the latter based on their previous interactions. From her point of view, Lin Yi should not be the kind of person who had no principles and only wanted to deceive a girl's heart. Although Cold admitted that she did not have a lot of experience in the martial world and could not be said to have the ability to read people, she could feel it with her heart. At least she could not feel the slightest bit of malice from Lin Yi. Otherwise, she would not have allowed Lin Yi to make those intimate actions today. Looking at Cold's expression at the moment, Lin Yi suddenly understood the thing that this little Cold girl was really concerned about. The reason why she behaved so coldly and vigilantly, always keeping people at a distance, was because she lacked a sense of security. This girl who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside was actually very afraid of being deceived. She was even more afraid of being toyed with by others for no reason after giving her feelings rashly. Lin Yi thought about it and said with a smile, "Actually, there's a conventional rule now. If a man and a woman break up, most of the time, the man will leave the house with nothing." Leave the house? Cold was stunned when she heard that. She could not help but ask with a strange expression, "Why do we have to leave the house with nothing if it's just to punish the man's mistakes? Isn't this rule a little too cruel?" "Ugh, you've misunderstood me. This cleansing doesn't mean cleansing. What I'm talking about is that the guy doesn't want anything after the breakup, leaving all his assets to the girl." Lin Yi didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Of course, he said that purely to comfort Cold. That was why he only picked the nicer words to say. He did not mention that although there were many men in this world who left the house with nothing, there were also many scumbags who asked for a ring after a breakup. Similarly, the world had always been like this. "Oh, so that's what you mean." Cold blushed a little, but she still asked curiously, "Since you've already broken up, why do you still leave everything to the woman? Are all men sick?" In the small, ancient Jianghu that she was in, once a man and a woman had a falling out, they would often fight over things. They would be eager to take back everything from the other party. Such examples were not uncommon. She had never heard of any man who would be so generous. They had obviously broken up, but he still left everything to the woman. I can't say that they're sick, but it's a prevailing social ethos. At least this is much better than fighting over property right after a breakup. A man should always be more responsible towards a woman. Lin Yi could only continue to pick the nicer words to say. However, deep down in his heart, he was rather touched. Chapter 5038. Is that so? Lung Lung nodded skeptically. It was not that she doubted Lin Yi, but this kind of thing was completely different from her worldview. It was impossible for her to believe it so easily. Could it be that all the men in the secular world had such a high level of awareness? As the two of them were talking, they saw a couple quarreling next to them. Listening to the content of the quarrel, they were not only asking for a divorce, but they were also fighting over the division of property. Lin Yi's face darkened when he heard that. He had just put some gold on the faces of the men in the secular world, and in the end, there was a scumbag who came out to undermine him. He was really not a liar. It was obvious that even God could not stand it anymore. This was too unlucky. As expected, Lung Lung's expression turned ugly. After spending a day together, The relationship between the two had reached a critical point. As long as they poked a hole in the window paper, they could go one step further. The little Lung Lung looked at everyone as if they were strangers, but when she looked at Lin Yi, her gaze carried some indescribable warmth. However, with this, the good impression that Lin Yi had built up with great difficulty collapsed instantly. Although Lung Lung's gaze was not strangers, it was impossible to strike, while the iron was hot, to go one step further. There are exceptions to everything. No matter how pure a place is, there will always be some scum. Don't misunderstand. I'm not the same kind of person as this scumbag. Lin Yi quickly tried to salvage the situation. Oh. Lung Lung nodded. Lin Yi could not help but feel perturbed when he saw her expression. Did she believe him or not? The two of them were silent for a moment. Lung Lung suddenly said, "Actually, you don't have to explain this to me. I've said it before. I'm not the same kind of person as you. It's impossible for the two of us to be together. Even if I really agree to it, it's not a good thing for you. It will only bring you a fatal disaster." "So serious? You're not a runaway bride from some big house, are you?" Lin Yi pretended to be surprised. Lung Lung was speechless, but she still said, "You can understand it that way. Either way, the two of us can't be together. I'm not lying to you. The level that I'm at is really different from what you've imagined. Someone might die. Hee, we've known each other for so long. Do you still think I'm an ordinary person?" Lin Yi suddenly said with a profound expression. "What?" Lung Lung was startled. Her first reaction was to subconsciously guess if Lin Yi was a cultivator too, putting aside everything else, at least judging from the fact that he had obtained 2 pieces of top-grade spiritual jades in succession. The possibility that Lin Yi was a cultivator was indeed very high. However, she quickly dismissed that thought because she could not sense any strength from Lin Yi at all. Even if Lin Yi was a cultivator, he could only be a cultivator in the secular world. It was impossible for his strength to be so high that she, an expert in the early stage of the foundation establishment stage, could not sense it after interacting with him for such a long time. Right? Actually, I'm also very awesome. It's just that I'm in trouble now. Back in the day, I was also an existence that shook the martial world. A simple stomp of my foot would make countless experts tremble in fear. Lin Yi purposely put on the demeanor of an expert. Lung Lung was immediately amused by him. The thought that had just emerged in her mind was instantly tossed to the back of Java. This guy was purely playing a prank to amuse her. How could he be a cultivator? She was too nervous. Lin Yi looked at her expression and could not help but chuckle. What he said sounded unreliable, but there was not a single lie in it. If he said it out loud, it would definitely be the truth. Unfortunately, people would take it as a joke. What else could he do? "It's almost time. Let's go eat," Lin Yi immediately suggested. "Sure." Lung Lung nodded. She had now obtained a piece of supreme-grade spiritual jade. She was already satisfied with today's trip. The two of them came to a seafood restaurant nearby. Business was booming. They had to queue for 20 minutes before they could get a seat. However, when the table of seafood was served, the two of them immediately felt that the queue was not in vain. The booming business was not fake. It was super delicious. Lung Lung was especially amazed as she ate. These dishes are so delicious. They're fresh and tender. I've never eaten them before. Is this the seafood that they were talking about? Yeah. Have you never eaten seafood before? Lin was even more surprised than her. No. Lung Lung did not even lift her head. She was eating happily. Previously, when they were not familiar with each other, she was cold and aloof. Now that they were familiar with each other, she was more open. Lin Yi could not help but feel even more puzzled. While he was looking at her eating the seafood, He was secretly speculating where this little cold girl came from. According to his previous speculation, she should have come from a place where the concentration of spiritual energy was denser than the secular world, but thinner than the heaven rank island. Be it the heaven rank island or the secular world, there were oceans. No matter how secretive the place was, it was impossible that she could not even eat seafood with her identity as a cultivator. Unless there was no ocean in the place where she came from, it was a third independent plane that was completely isolated from the secular world and the heaven rank island. This conclusion really surprised Lin. There was actually a third plane in this world. Moreover, it could produce quite a number of heavenly path experts. It was really unexpected. Lin Yi was making all kinds of speculations in his heart. Although Lung Lung was eating happily, she thought that Lin Yi was paying attention to her table manners when she felt his unusual gaze. She could not help but blush and put it away. She hastily resumed her usual cold demeanor. The atmosphere between the two of them suddenly became a little weird. It was only then that Lin Yi suddenly came to his senses. He thought about it and suggested, "It's kind of boring to eat like this. Why don't you tell me about your story? You've never talked about it before." Lung Lung was startled. She mumbled that there's nothing much to talk about my story. Why don't we talk about yours first? Lin Yi had long guessed that she would say that. He did not force her. He smiled and said, "All right, then I'll tell you about my story back then." "All right." Lung Lung let out a sigh of relief. She was not good at making up lies. Fortunately, Lin Yi did not get to the bottom of it. Otherwise, she would have exposed herself. Lin Yi smiled as he cleared his throat. He spoke with fervor and assurance. "Back then, I was also a martial arts expert who was in the limelight. I traveled thousands of miles to an overseas celestial island to learn from a master. At that time, I thought that I was already a very powerful top-notch expert. I was already a top-notch existence in this secular world. However, after I went to that celestial island, guess what happened?" "What?" Although Lung Lung felt that he was talking nonsense, she was still intrigued by him. Chapter 5039. He described it vividly. To Lung Lung, it was so detailed that it sounded like the truth. Little did she know that Lin Yi was talking about his personal experience. From the time he first entered the welcoming pavilion to the newcomers' tournament, he told her everything. The only difference was that he changed the names of the North Island, welcoming pavilion, and so on. Not only that, Lin Yi had also changed his cultivation level. He changed it to the so-called martial artist, martial master, martial general, martial king, martial honor, and so on. Otherwise, if he were to reveal his original cultivation level, Lung Lung would definitely know about it on the spot. That would be like exposing the window paper in advance. Lin Yi had no such intention. What Lin Yi did not know was that the strength level that he made up casually was later remembered by someone who had an ulterior motive. It even turned into a set of universal martial arts cultivation levels after a few years. Lung Lung was his only listener. She did not think much of it at first, but the more she listened, the more she was engrossed in it. In the end, she could not help but interrupt and ask, "The energy jade that you mentioned, is it the jade that you found today?" "That's right. You found out about it. Back then, there were a lot of these things on the Immortal Island. If all my assets were to be piled up with energy jade, I guess it would be at least a small hill." Lin Yi chuckled. In fact, it was more than a small hill. His current financial resources were already comparable to a large force. After all, he could casually refine some high-grade pills and sell them at a sky-high price. This was the advantage of being a high-level alchemist. They lacked everything but spiritual jade. "You're bragging." Lung suddenly smiled, but she still said, "Although the story you told is quite interesting, you better not tease me. You must have heard these stories from some storyteller. I know there are many storytellers in the secular world." Lung smiled. He smiled as he listened. This cold girl had unknowingly spilled the beans again. In fact, he deliberately said these things not just to kill time, but to let the other party gradually understand and accept him. This way, at least there would be a gradual process, and she would not be unable to accept it all at once. However, Cold's reaction made Lin even more certain of one thing, and that was that these heavenly Tao experts who came to the third plane had no knowledge of Heaven Stage Island at all. It was just that he could not confirm whether they did not know about the existence of Heaven Stage Island at all, or whether they were like the secular world, although the legend of Heaven Stage Island had spread, they could not reach it. The two of them chatted as they ate. When they were almost done, Lin went to the counter to pay the bill. "Thank you, 12,835. Let's forget about the small change, 12,800. The lady boss's charm was still there, but the boss standing next to her was a big and fierce man. At first glance, he didn't look like a businessman at all. Instead, he looked more like a gangster who mingled in the underworld. 12,800 yuan. Lin was stunned when he heard it. Although he did not count the dishes carefully when he ordered, he roughly estimated that this meal would cost at most 300 to 400 yuan. How could it be 12,800 yuan? "Yes, this is the menu you ordered, sir. There is a calculator here. If you don't believe me, you can calculate it yourself. Our business has always been fair to the old and young, and we never cheat people," the lady boss said with a smile. Lin glanced at her. If he really wanted to calculate this, he did not need a calculator at all. He just needed to calculate it in his mind. He said faintly, 396 yuan. "Do you need me to calculate it step by step for you?" "No, I think you have misunderstood, sir. Please look at the price list carefully again, and look at the sentence marked at the bottom." The lady boss still had a warm smile on her face. "The above seafood is priced individually?" Lin was slightly stunned. Normally, it was priced by the portion. How could it be priced individually? "That's right. That's it. Sir, look at this mango snail you ordered. It's priced at 98, and there are 60 of them in a plate, so that's 5,808. And this top-grade immortal prawn is priced at 72, and there are also 60 of them in a plate, so that's 4,302. Just these two dishes alone are already 10,200. Including the other dishes, 12,800 should be considered fair and reasonable, right?" The lady boss smiled amiably and actually gave people a feeling of sincerity. "You call this fair and reasonable?" Lung was about to lose her temper. Although she did not understand these and did not have a clear concept of the currency in the secular world, she knew that she was cheated when she heard Lin Yi's words. It was originally only 396 yuan, but it suddenly became 12,800 yuan. How could he do business like this? Previously, she thought that this seafood restaurant had a unique taste and had a good impression of it. Now, it suddenly turned into a bellyful of anger. How was this a seafood restaurant? It was clearly a scam shop. "Miss, please be polite with your words. The prices of this restaurant are clearly written on the price list. You must have seen it before you ordered the dishes. Since you have ordered these dishes, you naturally have to pay the corresponding amount. How is it not fair and reasonable?" The lady boss's face turned cold. "Hey, you two are not planning to dine and dash, are you? Brothers, watch out for me." The fierce-looking boss next to them immediately shouted and threatened. A few punks at the door chuckled and responded a few times. Each of them picked up a bench and stared at Lin and Lung Lung maliciously. Lung Lung was about to make a move immediately. Of course, she would not pay attention to a few punks in the secular world. However, Lin Yi stopped her calmly. He looked at the lady boss indifferently and said, "All right, then 12,800 yuan it is. I can still afford this amount of money." As Lin Yi spoke, he took out a thick stack of cash to pay the bill. The boss and the lady boss looked at each other, and their eyes suddenly lit up. They smiled happily and said, "That's more like it. I can tell that you're a local tycoon at first glance. How can you not take out such a small amount of money?" Although they said so, they were laughing in their hearts that this kid was really an idiot who was puffing himself up to his own cost. In order not to make a fool of himself in front of his female companion, he could only bite the bullet and do as he was told, even though he knew he would be ripped off. This time, he made the right choice. The seafood restaurant opened by the couple was actually not a scam shop. They usually did business in an honest manner. Only when they encountered outsiders like Lin Yi, who had a foreign accent and brought along a female companion, would they rip him off. Chapter 50-40. Lung Lung was furious at the side, but Lin Yi was very cooperative. He did not forget to say, after giving the money, 12,800 yuan. "You understand?" Sure. Come again. Next time. I'll give you a discount." The boss and the lady boss looked at each other and snickered. They quickly stuffed the money into the drawer. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Only then did he walk out of the door, with Lung Lung under a group of sarcastic gazes. He did not have the slightest anger of being ripped off. Instead, he behaved calmly, as if he was just having a normal meal. "Why are you such a coward? People are obviously lying to you. Why did you fall for it? Do you like to be a sucker? I hate this kind of idiot who pretends to be rich in front of women the most." Lung Lung's pretty face was full of coldness. If it was up to her, she would have smashed this black shop long ago. However, she did not know what was on Lin Yi's mind. He had been secretly stopping her and did not let her do it no matter what. Previously, when she was in the small Jianghu in ancient times, there were often some second-generation cultivators who deliberately pretended to be rich in front of her in order to pursue her. Little did they know that Lung Lung hated this kind of self-deceiving idiot the most. Every time she saw these people, she felt disgusted. She thought that Lin Yi was different from them. She did not expect that Lin Yi would also be a sucker. She had really misjudged him. "Do you think I'm that stupid?" Lin Yi asked with a smile. Lung Lung was stunned. She immediately swallowed back the scolding that was about to come out of her mouth. She asked curiously, "Then why did you give them the money obediently? Come, let's sit here to digest the food and watch the good show inside. You'll know after watching it." Lin Yi pretended to be profound and chuckled. He sat down on a stone bench by the street calmly. Lung Lung was full of doubts. However, since Lin Yi insisted, she could only sit down next to him and watch the situation inside the seafood shop at the same time. Sure enough, not long after, there was a sudden commotion in the seafood store. First, the boss and the boss's wife quarreled, and the quarrel spread to other employees, especially the gangsters at the door. Both of them were swearing and asking who stole the money in the drawer. Of course, no one was willing to admit to this kind of thing. Whether it was the owner and his wife, or those gangsters, none of them had a good temper. In the end, they actually fought each other and smashed the shop. What's going on? Lung Lung was baffled. Could it be that Lin Yi asked her to stay behind on purpose just to watch this? But how did Lin Yi know that these people would lose money? "Look, all their money is here." Lin Yi didn't know when he had a black bag in his hand, which was full of money. Not only did he just take out more than 10,000 yuan, but he also had about 40,000 yuan in total. "I'm afraid it's the turnover of the seafood restaurant in the past half a month. Of course, it may be cheated out in one day. How could it be? Lung Lung was startled. She, an expert in the early stage of foundation building, had been by Lin Yi's side all the time, but she didn't notice anything from the beginning to the end. She said in surprise, "How did you do it? Didn't I tell you before? I'm a martial arts expert. Of course, these little tricks are nothing to me." Linny laughed. "You're bragging." Lung Lung couldn't help but smile. She thought that she must have been so angry that she didn't notice it. This guy was really different from those people in the ancient small Jianghu. She really misunderstood him just now. "You'll know whether I'm bragging or not later." Linny didn't explain, let alone Lung Lung. Even those super big shots on the heavenly stage island couldn't understand his tricks. Who would have thought that when he took the money, he didn't do it himself, but put it directly into the space of the jade pendant? But then again, he really had to thank this unscrupulous shop this time. He was worried about money during this period of time. Although the two swindlers contributed $20,000 to him in the beginning, he had a total of $30,000 in cash in addition to his own. It was more than enough for him alone. The problem was that he was busy pursuing Lung Lung now. Flirting with girls would cost him money like flowing water. He had spent $6,000 to $7,000 just to buy mobile phones and other things in one day, in addition to all kinds of daily expenses. If he were to buy something expensive for Lung Lung, the money he had on hand might not be enough. He didn't expect that the other party would take the initiative to send money to his doorstep while he was worrying about this matter. Although Lin Yi could get money at any time with his tricks, he was not a thief without principles. He couldn't possibly steal from ordinary people for no reason. Only those scumbags who provoked him were his targets. It was the same with the two swindlers last time, and it was the same with the unscrupulous shop this time. To be honest, if it weren't for these guys, Lin Yi would have a headache for a while. In his eyes, these guys were the real money givers. "I think you're addicted to storytelling. You make it sound like it's real martial arts master." Lung Lung didn't believe his words at all. Suddenly, she was in a good mood and said, "Since the show is over, let's continue shopping. It's rare to come here. I want to take a good look at those beautiful clothes." Shopping? Linny was stunned. He thought that since Lung Lung got her wish of getting the supreme spiritual jade, she would definitely want to go back to recuperate as soon as possible. He didn't expect her to have such an interest. He could only say that women were indeed women. Shopping would always have a fatal attraction to them. Even Lung Lung, who came from the third plane, was no exception. "You're not willing?" Lung Lung looked at him coldly. No, of course I'm willing. In fact, I've wanted to give you a few sets of clothes. It's just that I didn't know your size, so I didn't dare to place an order. It's more than I could ask for if you could come out and try them on yourself today." Linny smiled. "You want to give me clothes?" Upon hearing this, Lung Lung suddenly blushed. She whispered shyly, "Isn't it only the husband who can buy clothes for his wife? How can I let you give?" The ethos of the ancient martial world was almost the same as the heavenly stage island. It was even more conservative. Unless it was a man and a woman who were committed to each other, personal items such as clothes were not to be given out casually. Giving clothes was equivalent to a confession in a certain sense. In the past, there were people who wanted to give personal items to Lung Lung, but she insisted on not accepting them. How can there be such a thing? Isn't it normal to give a few clothes to friends? Everyone is like that. Linny was surprised. Chapter 5041. However, even if she kept brainwashing herself, she could not help but feel a little guilty. It was as if she was about to commit to someone else. She was so nervous that her forehead was covered in sweat. Lin Yi felt it was strange as he watched. It was just a shopping trip. Was there a need to be so agitated? This state lasted for half an hour until both of them walked into the clothing stores on both sides of the street. Lung Lung's attention was diverted to all kinds of trendy clothes. Only then did she gradually return to normal. Otherwise, her heart would jump out of her chest if she continued like this. Lin Yi thought it was a little strange, but he didn't pay too much attention to it. There was only one thought in his mind right now. Who in the world would associate women with shopping? No matter how cute a girl was, once she started shopping, she would become a monster with infinite stamina. Shopping with them was exhausting. Even a magnate-level master would be exhausted to death. Once Lung Lung was in the zone, she would spend the whole afternoon shopping. Even Lin Yi could not bear it. If it was not for the fact that he wanted to confirm the relationship and clarify the matter of those Heaven Path Masters, he would have run away. Lung Lung finally stopped her shopping when it was dusk. She looked at Lin Yi, who was almost squashed by a huge pile of shopping bags, and said, "I'm sorry for letting you buy so many things accidentally." "No, it's nothing. As long as you're happy." Lin Yi forced a smile. "Then let's go back today. Unfortunately, Shima City is only so big. We'll finish shopping in one afternoon. Otherwise, I could spend the whole night shopping." Lung Lung was still not fully satisfied. Lin Yi broke out in cold sweat. Fortunately, this was a small Shima city. If it was a big city like Donghai City, Lung Lung would probably spend a few days and nights shopping. It would not be a problem for her early-stage foundation building strength. That would be great. Thank God. Looking at Lung Lung's unsatisfied look, Lin Yi was afraid that she would change her mind and want to shop for a second time. He quickly said, "We can shop later. It's getting late. Let's hurry back. We'll miss the last bus if we're late. Why don't we walk back?" "Are you tired?" Lung Lung suggested. After the tragic experience of being squeezed to death in the morning, she really didn't want to do it a second time, especially now that it was the evening rush hour. She saw that the buses that passed by were full of people, and it was not much better than the morning. Not tired at all. Lin Yi's spirits were lifted, even though he was physically and mentally exhausted when he was shopping with cold earlier and looked like he was about to die. It was just a psychological effect. With his strength, let alone shopping for an entire afternoon, even shopping for a few days would be easy and enjoyable for him. "Then let's go." Lung Lung nodded. Lin Yi was not tired, so naturally she, an expert in the early stage of foundation building, would not be tired either. This little bit of journey was nothing to her. Anyway, as long as they did not have to squeeze into the bus, it would be fine. The two of them walked all the way back, and not long after, they passed by a large river. After asking around, they found out that it was the Nama River, the largest river in the Nama City area. At this time, the sun was setting in the west, and the afterglow shone on the sparkling surface of the river, making it look especially gentle and beautiful. The scenery of this place isn't bad. Since we're not in a hurry to go back, why don't we sit for a while? Lin Yi suggested. Sure. Lung Lung immediately nodded in agreement. The scenery at this time did give off a strange feeling of warmth, and any normal person would want to enjoy it. There were green belts on both sides of the river, and there were also many stone benches and benches set up just like an open park. The two of them found a bench nearby and sat down, quietly enjoying the afterglow of the sunset. However, it did not take long before the atmosphere between the two of them became a little different. The reason was not because of them, but because the people sitting next to them were young men and women in pairs. Many of them were even making out in public, as if there was no one else around. This was more than an open park. It was simply a holy place for dating. How could they do this? Lung Lung's face suddenly blushed. Such a scene of public intimacy was unimaginable in the small Jianghu of ancient times. This was too immoral, and she felt embarrassed just by looking at it. This is very normal, although the ancient people said that it starts with feelings and ends with etiquette. The concept of this era is different. There's no harm in making out between young couples. These days, there's public display of affection everywhere, and it's not strange at all, Linny said with a smile. But this is too much. In our place, holding hands is the most we can do. That's already the limit, Lung Lung said with a blushing face. Then have you ever held hands with anyone? Linny suddenly asked. And no, Lung Lung shook her head, awkwardly, with her cold temperament that kept strangers away. Those second-generation cultivators who were pursuing her would never even think of touching her, let alone holding hands. In her opinion, this was a matter of great significance, just like receiving a personal item. It was a symbol of love. Upon hearing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. This little Lung Lung was really a pure mess. She was so cautious even when holding hands. As the two were talking, they suddenly heard a young couple talking about the two of them not far away. Although their voices were very low, whether it was Lin Yi or Lung Lung, how could their hearing be comparable to an ordinary person's? Hubby, do you think those two are here for a blind date? Why are they sitting so far away? The woman said softly. It doesn't look like it. Look at the man, with so many big and small bags beside him. It looks like they've just bought clothes and things like that. Who would buy these things for their first blind date? The man said disapprovingly. That's true. Then it must be the man who is pursuing this woman. But he's really silly. He didn't even hold hands with her after buying so many things. It's a big loss. The woman giggled. That's true. Who else would pursue a girl like this nowadays? So unsophisticated and stupid. Compared to the way I pursued you back then, this man is simply a pig, the man said proudly. You're still talking about it. The things you've bought for me can't even be compared to his. In the end, I've given my whole body to you, but he didn't even hold hands. How pitiful, the woman pouted. Before the woman's voice died away, Linny suddenly turned his head and said loudly, Who said I can't even hold hands? After saying that, Lin Yi grabbed Lung Lung's hand and even deliberately raised it in the direction of the two. Chapter 5042. Lin Yi rejoiced in his heart. This pair of man and woman were practically acting up to his doorstep. If it wasn't for the duo's provocation, he would be too embarrassed to take a step further. Now that things had turned out this way, even Lung Lung had chosen to acquiesce. Congratulations! The pair of man and woman were startled when they heard that. They had obviously lowered their voices, but they didn't expect Lin Yi and Lung Lung to hear it. Their gossiping behind someone's back was exposed in an instant. Both of their faces were burning. They hastily got up with an embarrassed expression and fled. The wind is strong here. Let's hurry up and get a room. Every minute of the night is worth 1,000 gold. The man even found an excuse for himself before he left. Annoying. The woman spat at him, but she still followed him obediently. After the duo had gone far away, Lung Lung struggled for a while and pulled her hand out from Lin Yi's hand. She said with a blushing face, Don't you overthink it. I was just helping you to smooth things over just now. I didn't mean anything else. Huh. Thank you so much. Lin Yi couldn't help but look at her in amusement. The difference between Lung Lung's words and actions was huge. Could it be that she was the type that said she didn't want it, but her body was very honest? No, you're welcome. Oh, yeah, what did they mean by getting a room? Lung Lung quickly changed the topic. Getting a room? It means getting a room at a hotel. Linny shrugged. Why? Are they foreigners too? Judging from their accent, they're obviously locals. Locals should have a house to stay in. Why are they wasting money at a hotel? Lung Lung couldn't help but wonder. This. Lin, he choked for a moment. He didn't know how to explain to her at that moment. If he were to say it directly, he would be treated as a hooligan. He could only mumble, maybe it's not convenient for them to do it at home, so they can only find a place outside. That kind of thing can only be done by getting a room. That kind of thing? What kind of thing? Lung Lung couldn't react for a moment. It can't be done in public. It must be done secretly in a room. Isn't that kind of thing between a man and a woman? Lin, he smiled bitterly. Something between a man and a woman. Lung Lung stared at the back of the two men in confusion. She recalled the man's last words of, "Every moment of the night is worth 1,000 gold." Only then did she finally understand. She blushed and spat. "Pervert! Actually, you can't say that. After all, it's a consensual thing. These days are not like the ancient times, where the barrier between men and women is not so serious." Lin, he explained with a bitter smile. Nowadays, almost all couples would go and get a room. According to Cold's logic, 99% of the young people were shameless and lewd. Really? The secular world is really chaotic. They don't even care about the most basic sense of propriety and honor. Lung Lung said indignantly. With her background in the immemorial martial world, it was really hard for her to imagine such a thing. This was the difference in outlook on life and the world. Lin, he was speechless when he saw her expression. She was so indignant just because someone else was going to get a room. If he were to suggest it, wouldn't he be beaten to death by her? What's wrong? Are you also such a person? Lung Lung frowned and looked at him. Suddenly, she moved a step away like a frightened deer. She was afraid that she was right. No, we don't need to get a room. We definitely won't get a room. Let's go home directly. Lin, he quickly waved his hand. That's more like it. Lung Lung nodded. After a while, she realized that she had been fooled. She stared at Lin E with a blushing face and said, "I don't want to do that kind of thing with you. Don't let your imagination run wild." All right. We won't do it even if we go home. Is this okay? Lin E had no choice but to raise his hands in surrender. He sounded like a strange uncle trying to abduct a little girl. You're not serious at all. Lung Lung muttered helplessly. She did not know why there was a ripple in her heart. She could not calm down even when she walked back to the apartment. She couldn't help but blush when she recalled all the things that happened today. Strictly speaking, it was the first time that she had spent an entire day with a man, and from time to time, there were some intimate actions that she had never dared to imagine before. Was this what people in the secular world called a date? Are you all right? Lin, he saw that her cheeks were so red that it was scary. He subconsciously reached out to check her temperature. He was shocked and said, "So hot? You have a fever?" No, I'm just a little tired. I'll go back first." Lung Lung was shocked and quickly ran back to her room. How was this a fever? She was simply too engrossed in thinking about those things. That was why her face was red. A foundation establishment stage expert would be tired just from shopping, even if it was excusable for her to be injured. There was no sign of it before this. Didn't this Lung want more? Lin mumbled in confusion. He then returned to his room. Although he had already decided to pursue Lung, his priority now was to recover his strength. He had already wasted the whole day today. He had to make up for the progress quickly. If he did not have enough strength, it would be futile even if he investigated the background of those Heaven Path experts. Lung, who was next door, was distraught. She could not calm down and cultivate properly It was her first time thinking about someone like this. Moreover, it was a man that she had not known for long. There were a few times when she wanted to put aside her distracting thoughts to cultivate and heal herself. However, Lin Yi's appearance would unconsciously appear in her mind. She could not extricate herself and could not get rid of it. What's wrong with me? Lung Lung was at a loss. She shook her head hard and clenched her teeth to soak herself in a cold bath. Only then did she feel slightly better. However, before she could cultivate in peace, she suddenly let out a muffled groan and fell to the ground. After a while, she struggled to get up. Her face was pale. After a few days of healing, her injuries were almost healed. She did not expect that it would relapse again like before. There was no end to it. After resting for a while, although her injuries did not show any signs of improvement, it did not further deteriorate to the point of no return. This was the silver lining in the misfortune. However, Lung Lung could not feel happy at all. In the beginning, she thought that it was just an ordinary injury. Even if the injury was a little more serious, as long as she drank the medicine and soaked in the medicinal bath, coupled with sufficient spiritual energy replenishment, she should be able to get through it. This was how she got through her injuries in the past. Even until the first relapse, she was still holding on to such a fluke in her heart. However, she had completely recognized the current situation now. Chapter 5043. If it was an existence like the ghostly thing, it would be a trivial matter to have one's primordial spirit injured. It could be done in a flash. However, the problem was that Lung Lung was only in the early stage of foundation building. Unless a cultivator of this level had cultivated a very special heart technique, they would usually be a blank in this aspect. Even if they knew that the source of the injury was in the primordial spirit, they would not be able to do anything about it. Fortunately, the person who attacked her only had a special cultivation method. He was not that strong himself. At most, he could only mix some dirty tricks with ordinary moves. Otherwise, if it was an expert like the ghostly thing whose primordial spirit was extremely powerful, she would be crushed by the primordial spirit directly. It would be impossible for her to stand here alive. Even so, Lung Lung's current situation was very tricky. There were only two ways to heal under such circumstances. Either a primordial spirit expert could remove the source of the injury for her, or she could rely on her own willpower and perseverance to forcefully suppress all the injuries in her body in a short period of time without leaving any traces. She could then wait for her primordial spirit to heal itself in the remaining time. Lung Lung had no idea that there was a primordial spirit expert by her side. To her, the first method was simply a fool's dream. Hence, she could only choose the latter stupid method. However, the success rate of this method was not high. Even if she had 2 pieces of spiritual jade of the highest grade in her hand and did not have to worry about the lack of spiritual energy, it was still extremely difficult to forcefully suppress all the injuries in her body without leaving any traces. Otherwise, if it was easy to do so, she would not have had these 2 repeated attacks. There's no other choice. This is the only way. Lung Lung took a deep breath and immediately began to heal her injuries again. Although she was inevitably worried, this was the only way out. In fact, if she could have further contact with Lin Yi today, it would be easy for Lin Yi to find out about her injuries and heal her. Unfortunately, the only physical contact between the two of them was holding hands. Moreover, it was only for a short while. Even Lin Yi could not figure out the source of her injuries in a short period of time. It was undeniable that fate made fools of people. The next morning, Lin Yi sent Lung Lung breakfast as usual. As a result, before he could knock on the door, a group of people suddenly came up the stairs. They were all hooligans. It was obvious that they did not come with good intentions. However, The leader of the hooligans was the landlord, Boss Huang. Of course, Lin Yi did not know who Boss Huang was. He had signed the contract with the real estate agent, so he had never seen the landlord before. Boss Huang did not know Lin Yi either, so he did not even spare a glance at Lin Yi, who was carrying breakfast. He brought his men and knocked on Lin Yi's room. "Are you looking for someone?" Lin Yi looked at this group of people in surprise. "Kid, mind your own business. If you don't have anything to say, then scram. We're here to collect our debts." A gangster at the side said in an unfriendly tone, "Collect debts?" Lin Yi was taken aback. "That's right. This family owes me a few $1,000,000. It's only right that they pay their debts." Boss Huang said. He was the landlord, yet he could say with certainty that he owed him a few $1,000,000. He looked like a victim who had suffered a lot. His acting skills were on par with those two swindlers. It could not be helped. He had sent two groups of people to pretend to be ghosts, but there was no news from them. He could not wait any longer. The suite that Lin Yi and Cold stayed in were actually his houses. He was counting on these two houses to make a lot of money. How could he allow them to live in such a stable manner? Normally, as long as one was scared off, the other one would be scared off as well, but Lin Yi hadn't been scared off 2 times in a row. There hadn't been a single movement for half a month, and he couldn't help but feel anxious. Was this new guy really not afraid of ghosts? Since pretending to be a ghost was useless, he could only rely on a living person. Boss Huang had no choice but to do it himself. Not only was it risky, but the cost was also high. After all, he had to spend a lot of money to entertain this group of gangsters. However, in order to scare Lin Yi and Cold away and continue to make money, he had to go all out. "I'm sorry, but you've come to the wrong place. This house is now rented to me. The landlord is not here at all. I've never seen him before," Lin Yi said calmly. "What? He rented it to you?" Boss Huang looked at Lin Yi from head to toe. He thought to himself, "This kid looks so ordinary. Why can't I scare him away? That's right. Please don't block my door. Everyone, please go back." Lin Yi curled his lips. "Stop playing dumb. I've come all the way here to collect the debt. Since that bastard isn't here, I'll have to reluctantly collect the debt from you. You're his tenant anyway, so you can just ask him for the money later." Boss Huang chuckled coldly. "Oh, this is the first time I've heard of such a debt collection method. Judging from your reaction, don't tell me you've been targeting me since the beginning?" Lin Yi said with a faint smile. No matter how good Boss Huang's acting skills were, he could not hide his sharp eyes. If he could not react in time, he would not be Lin Yi. "What did you say?" Boss Huang was startled. He quickly covered it up and said, "I know who you are. Who the hell would deal with an irrelevant stranger like you? Cut the crap. You just don't want to pay, right? Beat him up. Beat him up and he'll be obedient." "No problem. Brother Huang, you have to reward us well after this." The gangsters were delighted. They had discussed it before they came. They were just there to support Boss Huang and scare him, but if they really beat him up, the price would be doubled. "Leave it to me." Boss Huang clenched his teeth. Of course, he did not want to spend the money, but no matter how good his acting skills were, there would still be flaws. It would be troublesome if the kid saw through his tricks. His scam of pretending to be a ghost purely relied on scaring people to earn money. Once it was exposed, it would be worthless, and he would not be able to earn a single cent in the future. Now that Lin Yi was suspicious of him, he had no other choice but to cut the Gordian knot. As long as he could successfully scare the kid away, he would be able to earn the money back in the blink of an eye. The group of gangsters immediately surrounded Lin Yi. Beating people up was a common occurrence for these gangsters, especially when a group of gangsters bullied a single person. Moreover, the person was an outsider with no local background. There was no risk at all, and the money was basically free. At that moment, Cold from next door had arrived at the door. She saw the scene through the peephole and was about to step forward to help Lin E out of the situation. After all, Lin E was just a normal person. He would definitely be at a disadvantage if he was outnumbered. Chapter 5044. Bulsh ** T. I'll count to 3. If you return the money on behalf of the landlord, we'll talk. Otherwise, there are so many of us here. It's normal for us to accidentally kill someone. You better think about it. Boss Huang chuckled coldly and said, 1, 2, 3. Before he could finish, Lin E suddenly pressed his hand on Boss Huang's head without warning. Bang! Boss Huang's fat body fell to the ground with a loud thud. He groaned in pain and could not get up for a long time. Everything happened so suddenly that the gangsters jumped in fright. They looked at Lin E with a little more fear in their eyes. Boss Huang was at least 200 kilograms, and this guy was able to press him down so casually. How strong did he have to be to do that? What are you afraid of? There's only one kid here, and we have 6 brothers. We can kill him with a slap each, shouted the leader of the gangsters. He then launched a kick at Lin E. However, Lin Yi's kick was faster than him. While his leg was still in the air, it was snapped by Lin Yi's kick. His whole leg was bent at a terrifying angle and flew backward. He crashed into the fire cabinet behind him and fell to the ground on the spot. The gangsters were shocked again. They had yet to make a move, and 2 of their men were already lying on the ground. How troublesome. Let's go. Brothers, don't hold back anymore. There are so many of us. If we can't even take care of him, how are we going to show our faces in the future? The remaining 5 gangsters were furious. People who worked in the underworld cared about their reputation the most. Although they were a little anxious, they gritted their teeth and fought. They could not lose this fight because it would be embarrassing if they lost. Generally speaking, it was rare for an expert to kill someone in a fight. On the contrary, it was a fight between gangsters who knew nothing about martial arts that could easily lead to death because they had no sense of propriety and were usually armed. The 5 of them pulled out a steel pipe at the same time and swung it at Lin Yi's head without hesitation. Lung Lung, who was hiding in the house and watching the show, was shocked when she saw the situation. Fighting like this could really kill someone. She didn't hesitate to make a move, but she didn't expect Lin E to be faster than her. Before the steel pipes of the 5 hooligans could land, he took the initiative to step on each of them heavily. Their feet were forcefully deformed. An earth-shattering sound of a pig being slaughtered was heard. The 5 gangsters threw away the steel pipes at the same time. Each of them hugged their feet and cried for their parents. The scene was heartbreaking, and anyone who saw it would shed tears. What are you waiting for? Do you want me to give one more kick to each of you? Linny looked at them condescendingly. Boss Huang and the others did not even dare to let out a fart. They immediately covered their heads and scurried down the stairs. If they still could not react in time and encountered a ruthless person, they would not be able to live anymore. The group of gangsters screamed all the way out of the gate of the residential area. When they saw that Lin E did not chase after them, they finally breathed a sigh of relief. Each of them looked at Boss Huang with a bitter face. Was this the mother * king soft persimmon that he said would deflate with just a pinch? Don't look at me. I didn't know this kid was so ruthless. If he really wanted to trick you guys, would I still be here to be beaten up today? Boss Huang grumbled. He finally understood now. No wonder the 2 groups of gangsters could not scare this kid away when they pretended to be ghosts. His moves were fast and ruthless. He was obviously not an ordinary person. It seemed like it would not be easy to find someone to deal with this kid unless they paid a huge price. However, Boss Huang was not a little gangster with a one-track mind. He was a businessman. He would not do this kind of obviously unprofitable business. He might as well wait until the kid's rent was due. He did not care if the kid was ruthless or not. When the time came, he would not have to rent the house anymore. At the same time, Lung Lung walked out of the door. She looked up and down at Lin Yi again. She clicked her tongue in surprise and said, "It seems like you didn't lie to me. You're really good at fighting." "Of course. I told you a long time ago that I'm a Wulin master. These gangsters are nothing to me," Linny said with a laugh. "You're bragging." Lung Lung could not help but laugh. Although Lin Yi's moves were clean and quick, she thought that he was just an ordinary person. She could only say that Lin Yi's reflexes were above ordinary people. The martial arts master was just a joke. Lin Yi did not explain. He handed her the breakfast he bought earlier and said, "Here, eat it while it's hot." "Okay." Lung Lung took the breakfast naturally. After a while, she suddenly realized that Lin Yi seemed to have been carrying the breakfast. He fought 7 people in the blink of an eye, but he did not even spill a bit of the soy milk. This did not seem to be something that ordinary people could do, right? "What's wrong?" Linny looked at her strangely. "Oh, nothing." Lung Lung smiled. The thought flashed in her mind. They had known each other for a long time. She did not believe that Lin Yi was a cultivator. She must be thinking too much. "All right, I'll go back first. Do you want to go out for lunch?" "I'll call you," Linny suggested. Lung Lung nodded. Before she closed the door, she deliberately reminded, "Don't knock on the door. Make a phone call." "Okay." Lin Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry. Ever since she bought the mobile phone, this little cold girl was addicted to playing with the mobile phone. They were living next door, but she still insisted on making a phone call. However, this was not bad. When he was in a good mood, he could have a long talk with her on the phone. Their relationship had progressed by leaps and bounds. Lin Yi could not ask for more. However, Lung Lung on the other side was in a dilemma. On one hand, she could not help but develop in this direction involuntarily. On the other hand, she was afraid that she would sink deeper and deeper until she could not extricate herself. Her rationality told her that she could not go on like this. Her relationship with Lin Yi was destined to be fruitless. The deeper she sank now, the deeper she would be hurt in the future. It was not a good thing for both of them. There were a few times when she wanted to make it clear to Lin Yi face to face. However, every time she saw Lin Yi, the words that she had thought of beforehand would be thrown to the back of Java. Every time she was with Lin Yi, she felt relaxed and happy. She really could not bear to tear everything apart with her own hands. However, it was not a solution to go on like this. When it was late at night, Lung Lung finally made up her mind. The reason why she had been delaying it was not because she could not bear to say it to him face to face. The more important reason was actually herself. It was because her injuries had not fully healed that she had the excuse to keep delaying it. She always thought that it would not be too late to make it clear to Lin Yi when her injuries were fully healed. However, she was just deceiving herself. If this went on, even if her injuries were fully healed one day, how could she guarantee that she would be able to say it out when the roots of her feelings were deeply planted? You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.